Welcome back to Uncharted X. This is Ben, and I hope you're all doing well. This video is a recent swapcast and conversation with my good friends Kyle and Russ Allen of the Brothers of the Serpent podcast, getting into all of the details around the Vayscan project that I've been a part of this year. If you're looking to hear more detail and discussion around these remarkable artifacts and their recently uncovered and entirely astonishing attributes, then you're likely going to enjoy this conversation. Before we get started, a couple of channel updates, so skip forward a couple minutes or use the chapters below if you want to get straight into the discussion. Firstly, I'm very happy to say that the 5th season of Gyges' Ancient Civilizations show is available for streaming, and that I was a part of it. This season gets into the ancient legends of the lost civilizations of Mu and Atlantis, and how the cataclysmic origin stories found from all around the world, when looked at through the lens of recent scientific discoveries like those around the Younger Dryas, are revealing the truth behind these stories. Here's a clip from the show.
And around that 12,800, 900 year boundary, we find something called the Younger Dryas layer. And we find this layer all around the world, in areas from North America to the tip of South America and Chile. We also find the Younger Dryas boundaries in South Africa, as well as in Europe. In fact, most of these indicators, at least in the early days of this work, came from archaeological sites in North America, the Clovis sites that go back to around 13,000 years ago. So it's a very well-defined strata layer that we see in the ground that we can define to specific dates. And this consists of a black mat layer, and just below that we also find what we would term impact proxies. Things like shock-synthesized nanodiamonds, magnetic spherules, large quantities of extraterrestrial platinum and iridium metal groups. These proxies are really only formed in the extremely high temperature conditions that occur during cosmic airbursts and cosmic impacts.
If you're interested in checking out the full season of Ancient Civ 5, signing up at Gaia is an excellent way to help out the Uncharted X channel and to get access to tons of great content on the Gaia network. My affiliate link for a Gaia membership is below in the description and in the comments, as is the link for a special offer for a free 7-day trial if you want to check it out before committing. In other channel news, I've started publishing live stream highlight videos on my second channel, Uncharted X Live. These are the good bits from my regular live streams, unscripted, live content, typically looking at raw footage from various locations and getting into all sorts of topics and discussions, even addressing some of the skirps and critics if you want to hear that sort of thing. Check it all out on my other channel, Uncharted X Live. The link to that is below. I'd love your subscription over on that channel, and please do hit the bell to get notified for new uploads. I hope to have a couple of these coming out every week. If you want to catch my actual live streams, jump in my Discord or follow me on social media for notifications. Again, the links are all below. Lastly, I'm happy to say that I'll be speaking at the Eclipse at the Canyon event next year, April 6th to 9th, in Utopia, Texas. This is really going to be a lot of fun. It's an astronomical event, an ancient mystery conference, and outdoor camping music festival all rolled up into one. The totality of the solar eclipse will be right overhead during the event, and there'll be a bunch of great speakers and lots of live bands, including $50 Dynasty, over 3 nights of camping. If that sounds good to you and you're interested in attending, all of the details for Eclipse at the Canyon are on the Eventbrite page linked below. Now, on to the discussion, and I hope you enjoy the video.
And we are joined by Ben from Uncharted X. Well, I guess he just told us that he's not an actual podcaster.
He's a YouTuber.
He's a YouTuber.
Yes, you guys are the podcasters.
We're the podcast, but you have a podcast.
Professional podcasters. Technically, yes. I guess so.
Yeah. When's the next episode, bro? I refresh my feed, my Uncharted X feed every day.
Yeah. From the last episode that was like a year ago.
Yeah.
Yes.
Every day.
Well, I am booked. We've been talking about this. I'm booking Kyle. I want you guys one-on-one on these podcasts because I've got shit to say, and I want an audience to say it with. And I think Kyle could get on board with me, talking mad shit about a few things.
Yeah.
I'm in.
Good.
Yeah, I can't wait to listen to
It's
this.
going to happen. It's gonna
New
happen.
podcast
Yeah.
on the Uncharted X feed that I've been refreshing every day for a year. I'm stoked to hear that you got a special guest coming on.
Dude, it'll be episode 30. What are you guys up to? Like 6 million? 600? 600? I don't even know.
We just passed. We did episode 301.
301
recently.
That's right.
Yeah. So now we're at, what is this? This is episode 306 right here.
306 minus
Yeah.
1, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Well, you
So it'll be 305 episodes. Episode number 306.
I do like your persistent doggedness and sticking to the we don't celebrate except it's not 200, it's 201.
No, it's 201. Yeah. 201 is the actual 200. So, yeah. Longest running gag joke in podcast is fantastic. 6 years.
Well, you know, when you make a huge mistake in episode 1, you're kind of stuck forever after that.
It's now written in stone.
That's right.
You know what to do the first episode.
So, you've been doing all kinds of stuff since the last time we had you on. You were back in Egypt. You've been working on this vase stuff, which is fantastic. Like, if anyone hasn't seen the recent Uncharted X videos on
Yo, what up, Chris? My mom made... Oh, yeah, I'm Moonraker.
breaking ground,
My mom made cabbage rolls.
like absolutely,
So I'm eating them.
people are always, we get emails, we get comments, of course, in the Discord, and people are like, I want
Some
answers to
pomegranate.
this, or at least to some of this in my lifetime. Like, can we move, the thinking here a little bit? And like, I think that you're actually doing that with this work.
I'm reporting on it. Yeah, I mean, I'm lucky enough
Thanks,
to be
man.
reporting on it. I mean, I can't take credit for the
Yeah,
work.
I'm lucky. I'm very lucky and blessed. I really am.
That, the credit goes to the guy, Adam Young, who
I know there's people whose mothers have passed away, sadly.
particularly Adam Young.
So I really
has been
am
on this bandwagon for
blessed, and
10 years or so.
I think about
I mean, a lot
that
of people
often
have
from
been,
others. And
and this is why
I'm
it
just
was
a lucky
so
guy, I
valuable
really
for
am.
me when they reached out. It's because like a lot of people have looked at these vases and these artifacts and said there is something there. Like visibly, you can see there's elements of precision. I mean, it's just absolutely mind-blowing stonework. This incredible perfection and symmetry and balance, and there's these thin materials that are extremely hard stone, and it's just how do they do it? It's amazing, and wouldn't it be great if we can analyze it? And so, a lot of people have been on that bandwagon, but Adam Young was actually the guy who set out and had the resources to try and do something about it. Like he did have a deliberate plan of going out and tried to acquire the most precise and best examples of these vases that he could, and he did eventually get his hands on what I term the OG vase, the original gangster, original granite, whatever. But the OG vase that all the initial work was done on, and he's been out there trying to get that scanned and analysed, and eventually, he went on a trip with Chris Dunn and met Alex Dunn, and they took him a couple of years to kind of put all the pieces together, and then Alex brought in Nick Sierra, and of course they're professional metrologists. They work in the aerospace industry. They're familiar with all of the CAD and the geometric tools and the GD&T stuff that they do on their daily, in their daily lives. And they were able to analyze the results of the scan from this initial vase, and the conclusions started coming. It was mind-blowing, and of course, Chris Dunn put Alex onto me and said, well, I think they did it and they couldn't get any attention on it, and they're like, well, we need an outlet for it, and I guess I'd had a relationship with Chris Dunn for a while, and they connected with me, and I was like, this is fantastic, like this is exactly what I've been calling for years, like you guys have done the thing that, as you said, like if we want to move the needle forward, we want to move the conversation forward, we need to apply ourselves and our technology and actually investigate this stuff and try and put some metrics and measurements around it, and that's exactly what they did. And it personally was just validating, I guess, right? It's like this theory and this thought that I've had for so long, as have many other people, and I was like, shit, here's the proof. Here's solid evidence that this is exactly what we're looking at. Like, it's really not something that's possible by hand. We're looking at real evidence of sophisticated machining and technology use that comes from some of the earliest periods of history. And, it's verifiable, and you can repeat it, and here's the model, anyone can look at it. So, I was so happy when they contacted me, and it's sort of taken on a life of its own since then, and we put that out, and their timing was impeccable because it was I think 2 or 3 months before I went on Rogan.
Yeah.
And I was like, man, you guys have timed this well, because now I can mention it on that platform. I probably didn't have enough context. I couldn't talk about it as well as I would have liked to, certainly as much as I can now, and understanding all the things now. But that year since then has been insane in what's happened, and what the opening this up to the world and making it, what do you want to call it, open source. It's been just an incredible response, and we've just, it's grown a life of its own from there on.
So
Man, that
there's,
was really necessary.
to me, it looks like, you know, the conversation has moved because of this from these were done by hand, by the, you know, what's the name of the typical depiction that they show?
At Sakara?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Doesn't
so
have a name.
I don't know if they have a name for it, but it's, I mean, look, the typical explanation for these is, given they're pre-dynastic and there's no use of the wheel. You know, these are done with.
Wow, I
grinding
scarfed
stems,
that. Holy
essentially,
jeez.
like they use crooked sticks with a flint, like weights on the end of a crooked stick with a flint tip, and they're rubbing on it with sand and banging on it with rocks. That's literally the technology level that is used to explain these. And in fact, there are scenes on the walls where you can see Egyptians doing that stuff, but
Yes,
you know what
that's what I'm talking about.
it matches. Yeah, it's at Saqqara, like 3rd Dynasty, but it matches. You know, as if you watch my content on it, I think that exactly matches the alabaster industry that we see. That was pretty much given rise to about this 3rd, 4th dynasty. After these, you know, these vases have been in existence for a long time before that. Like they go back almost tens of thousands of years. I mean, we have examples at 9,000, 10,000 BC, even as far as 14 or 15,000 BC of burials that they've found these sort of artifacts in there. But certainly a lot of them attributed to, you know, 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th dynasty, Old Kingdom. And then after that, they sort of peter out, and you have this alabaster industry of these definitely handmade, definitely not as precise, much softer stone. Beautiful work, but totally producible by these primitive methods. And in fact, this is one of the things that I did when I was in Egypt last time, as I was filming at one of the alabaster shops in Luxor. They are still making these things, still making these alabaster vases with the exact same techniques that they were using 3, 4, 5,000 years ago. Just with steel tools now. And you can go to these alabaster stores and you can get the nice machined, lathe-made alabaster vessels, but they also, you can buy these handmade ones, and they very much match the handmade alabaster vessels from ancient Egypt. But that's what that scene on the wall's depicting. But what happens in, I guess, the mainstream stories, they go, well, see, this is just how they made all this stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
And it just doesn't make any sense. It's impossible. Basically.
So these, aside from the provenance thing, these measurements have shown. So then people started saying, well, you know, it's easy to do with a lathe, right? Like I've seen that. Like, oh, it's simple with a lathe, right? Yeah, but now it's some of the measurements that at least were taken recently by. I think I gathered this from watching your video, the Ancient Precision Confirmed, was basically saying that the section of the vase between the lug handles is also very precise. And you can't do that with a lathe.
Well, you can't do any of it. And it's not just any old lathe either. So, in terms of outright numbers, I mean, we have examples with a number of these vases now where you're talking, 1.5, 2, 3 thousandths of an inch. Like that's, and again, I do the demonstration in the video, Alex does, where it shows you, a single human hair is about 2 thousandths, between 2 and 3 thousandths of an inch thick. So, this is a tiny distance. If you want microns, it's like 25 microns is about 1 thousandth of an inch, roughly. It's pretty close enough, right? A single micron is about the size of a bacteria, so we're talking pretty small. So some people get all worked up about the metric versus bananas thing, but whatever. We're in America. The tools are in Imperial. Deal with it.
We're using bananas.
We're using bananas, goddammit. Yeah. I even put that in the video, and I'm like, mate, get your jokes out, because for sure there's people bitching and moaning about it. I'm like, all right, whatever. It's going to happen. But I know math is hard. You can't, the conversion's really hard, but you try me.
No, it's your job.
That's right.
You're
It's
making
my
the
job.
video.
God damn it.
You make the conversion.
I must repeat every measurement in both systems.
Yes, we got that in reverse for the Göbekli Tepe video. People were like, I don't know what a meter is. Can you tell me what this is in feet?
Look it up. Yeah, I know. I get the same thing.
Yeah.
I try, man. I did it in a lot of videos. It's just all this many bananas, you know, and it's just like, oh,
Yes.
Christ.
Yeah.
But anyway, my point is that it's, it's not just any lathe. Like to get that degree, it's not like some fucking wooden lathe contraption
Right.
where some dude's like strap some shit together with twine and sticks and wood and a spinning table that he's just sort of wobbling around all over the place. You need, and to do this stuff in granite like that, and not just granite, but you know, all these other types of stone, diorite and things that are much harder than granite. I mean,
I'm working with a guy right now who's used to machine parts for NASA.
yeah,
And I was talking to him about this, and he was like, "You can't lathe granite. You have to grind it.
right.
Like, yes, you can mount it on a lathe and you can spin it, but you're not going to be cutting it with
Blowing it apart.
any normal. Yeah, it would shatter,
That's right.
especially if you get the thinness. So he's like, it's got to be a grinding action.
But circular.
You have to have some kind of tool that's actually just grinding away at it.
Yeah, not a cutting
Like,
tip.
and he's talking, yeah, not like a carbide cutting tip or anything like that. But he's talking about obviously modern lathing, like that you would lathe like a metal tool or something like that.
Yeah, it's
And
yeah.
go ahead.
No, I was going to say. I mean, it's just that is one of the big points. It's like people admitting that, and I even had a discussion with shit, I'm going to forget his name again. Irving Finkel, who was at the Megalithomania conference recently. He's the curator of the Middle Eastern collection at the British Museum. Famous guy. You've probably seen him on YouTube. Long grey hair with a ponytail, big beard. He does like there's a chess. He plays the ancient game of whatever the chess precursor game was, and he's all over YouTube. Interesting guy. Hugh knows him, and Hugh Newman knows him. And I was hanging out with Hugh in the UK, and Hugh just like cold calls him, gets a hold of him, and says, and then hands the phone to me. And it's like I'm like, thanks, Hugh. Like now I'm like, hey, bro, I'm trying to explain to him like what we're doing, and you just get this. He's like, well, yeah, anything that's turned on the lathe is going to be precise. Is kind of the pushback, and I don't want to argue with him. What I want is to get into the museum and to be able to
I do not.
scan some of these artifacts and trying to have a relationship. So
I would, but
send you a written
I just don't.
breakdown of what we're doing and what we're proposing and this sort of stuff.
I don't know. I like the experience of the plant. The plant is, I don't know. It's just
People don't
so many millions of years of evolution. But yeah, I do like stronger stuff.
in archaeology. They're not precision engineers. They don't understand the nature of precision and what we're looking at.
I would.
A couple thousandths of an inch in materials like granite, because you just people admitting that okay, it was turned on the lathe. That's not sufficient, because
Yo, what's up,
in order
Robertson
to
Bruno?
get those
Thanks, man.
results in something like granite, you have to have ultra precise and solid bearings, rods, the screws, like all the components of this lathe, like massive metal, super strong. You have to just even be able to grip.
Yeah, I don't know how long I'm gonna play this for.
and keep it stable enough where you can exact enough force on that thing to carve it or grind it. I mean, all of those things take the very best kind of machinery that we have today. This isn't something that you can strap together with bits of wood in a backyard. Like, this is industrial precision machinery. It would take some of our best machinery to get this result today. And
That's somewhat like that's what it's almost like a paradox that is precision. Because in order to get a certain type of precision, you have to have some already type of precision.
you have to be
If you want to talk about a bearing, you have to have a very precise circular object.
Such a scam.
In order to get that, you have to have precision.
measurement and
You have to
precision.
make something spherical. You have to make spherical. I mean, even if it was just a sleeve or a bushing type bearing, the shaft and the bearing itself have to be precisely aligned. To do that, you already have to have precision.
Yeah.
So it just keeps going back, and this is one of the things that really struck us when we got into this. Was like, how did this even start? Like, how do you start? And the funny thing is, in the modern age, precision starts with basically rubbing 3 stones together.
Yeah, lapping, right?
Yes.
And
That's just wild.
and
Really, it comes down to that.
How about you? Do you, Baron?
Work off of that.
Do you, Sailor?
Forward. You can't move forward.
that's right. And more than that, it's
Sailor
one of the
curse.
reasons why I insist, and I've done videos on this premise, is that there is a relationship between precision and function. Like you do not develop precision unless there is a need for like the functional return it gives you. Like it's too expensive to develop precision, and this is true for our modern world. Like precision starts. I mean,
I know
we
what you mean.
started developing precision machining techniques in order to make naval cannons shoot straight, because
That's what I was gonna say. It all comes down to how do you manage an explosion inside the
yes, yeah, steam engine like
That's
this. Yeah.
yes. The bigger the explosion you want to make, the more precise this thing needs to be.
Yeah, because they used to cast what they would do. They'd cast these damn cannons in steel or bronze or whatever, and then they'd shoot them while they were hot.
Yeah.
And then, all right, that's the way it's going to shoot from now on. It's just like, it's inaccurate as death, you know, like all over the shop. And then someone figured out, well, maybe we can, if we actually figure out and we can make a straight hole on this thing, maybe we can make it shoot more accurately. And it turns out, and you stick this thing on a water wheel and they make a primitive lathe and
I
they
hear you.
grind it out. And,
Are you into vaping at all?
and that's where it starts, and then it extends into, you know, watchmaking.
I would highly recommend the Riser Air Max. That's what I have. It's like $200 bucks.
This wasn't a thing that happened until the turn of the 18th century. James Cook's second voyage of discovery was only the time when we had enough accurate time.
Oh, only the cards, yeah.
Enough where we could actually navigate with longitude as well as latitude.
Dude, have you seen this glass
We'd have
mouthpiece?
to run down an easting on a westing, right? You'd go to where you needed to be on the latitude, and then you'd go straight east or west because you couldn't measure east or west before this. And of course, that's
It's amazing.
That's very inefficient when it comes to traveling across the ocean.
Yeah, especially yes.
A Riser Air
Yeah,
Max.
what was the accuracy that they needed? They said something like the timepiece had to lose less than a second per month.
Yeah, something
like that
to get accurate.
Which is
The glass bowl is what really makes it amazing.
like horribly inaccurate compared to what we have today, but that was, you know, like the kind of clocks that they had back, especially, you know, you're trying to run a water clock or something with a swinging pendulum on a ship.
Yeah, right.
That's swinging, you know, so you're like, no, we can't use any of these tools that we've been using to keep time, like water dripping out of something or something swinging. You have to build something else.
I just put flour in there with a little bit of cotton.
Right. There was time and precision in time as well.
That's a filter.
Most of it was about explosion.
Yeah, well, then steam of the industrial age.
Yeah,
steam
engines.
All of a
How
sudden
do I
you're trying
make
to
something explode?
contain pressure
inside this thing?
Right.
Yeah.
We need these flat surfaces, and we need bearing. Now we need to contain all that power and pressure. Yeah, and that's leads you down the path of like, well, we need to get better at this because there's a functional return on the back of it, so we'll spend the money to do it, and you end up
Yes.
a couple hundred years later doing, you know, what, 7 nanometer processes in silicon, making, you know, integrated circuits with literally millions and millions of transistors in them, so we can put the fucking things in washing machines and dishwashers and it,
That's
you know,
right. That's the other part of the point is that you're saying that precision follows function, the necessity of a type of function, and yet we have these bases. Well, that don't appear to have a function unless it's a message or it's just.
What?
because
Come on,
one of
man.
the other options is once you have precision for some other reason, then whatever you do with those machines is going to be precise to the tolerances of those machines. So the basis could be just artifacts of the precision level of the machinery.
I think it's nice, yeah. It is. It's a bit pricey though.
Function could be that they wanted to encode some like
Thanks, buddy.
precise like that.
Well, and I'm sort of
Yeah, it produces a lot of vape.
by the concept of that these objects are actually not. They're very precise. In other words, because they're art objects or decorative objects, they're making them precise. But in the same way, we
That was
might
terrible.
make a trash can or a poster or even a modern vase. Didn't you guys measure a modern vase in the recent video? Somebody he went and brought one. Yeah, marble. It's very nice and polished on the outside, the marble one, but the interior was like whatever, right? They didn't care so much. And so you think about like when we're making objects like that, something like this, you want it to be precise enough to look good, but it just needs to look good. But if but then you also have your machines. So the machine in your factory has this certain level.
It's clean, right? No ash,
And that's what you end up with on the object.
no smoke.
Maybe use your most precise machines to make stuff like this.
I have a couple of points to make on this. I know the exact. Yeah, I've thought about this.
Okay.
So firstly, you're right in that once you develop precision and your manufacturing system, and given this is I think there was a manufacturing system, this isn't just dudes banging on stuff with rocks and rubbing on sticks and shit. Once the manufacturing system delivers that precision, that's what you get. That's why our toasters and our car panels and everything today are very accurately made. They don't need to be, but the stuff gets designed in CAD and it gets executed on through a computer, and the system just punches it out and delivers it within whatever the tolerance is. Tiny little tolerances. It's very precise. Doesn't need to be. It's what the manufacturing system delivers. So, can you explain that stuff this way? I think so. I think there's a reasonable explanation. I do use that explanation, I think, for the statues, because there's been some work done on the statues and the symmetry and the faces of the Ramsey statues and artifacts, which I also think are probably the output from these types of manufacturing systems, and you really can't argue that those statues are functional. They're clearly artwork, they're representational, they're symbolic, all these things. But they're very precise and they seem symmetrical, and at least as far as with the scanning and the analysis that's been done so far, I think that's the result of these manufacturing systems. Now, the vases are a little different. I'm not sure what to make of them just yet. I think it's interesting that they seem to encode so much data.
I hate this game, bros. I really hate this fucking game. Like this fucking game.
Cover the vase thing a few times, and I've talked about it at conferences, but the depth of sacred geometry that seems to be in these things, this mathematical system that's behind them that is based on radians,
What's up, Toad? How are you, man?
pi and phi, and sort of these universal
What up, Toad?
principles and constants that encode our reality. I think
Yo, what's up, Heidi? What's up, man?
it is communicating this information.
Thanks for being here, people.
to
My
us in
friends,
time, and it's
my
I don't know if
peeps.
it's deliberate or if that's
homies.
just a result of the math system they
We're
were
warming
using.
up.
So
I'm
that
coming
was
back from the
access to
from the flu.
system and everything they did encoded those things, and that's going to be a really interesting point if we can continue to analyze more artifacts. Are we seeing this radial traversal pattern? Are we seeing the same significant ratios of pi and phi and the golden ratio? All these aspects that we found in the vases, I suspect and we've seen them in multiple vases, so we might see them in multiple artifacts. We're certainly seeing some indications of that just based on looking at some of the old work with this new lens now.
Yeah.
But
Hope they found me.
are they functional? Are they artistic? I don't know. I think there's a chance that these vases might have actually been functional. I don't think they're all vases.
Toad is
There's
a
too many of
in
them.
high demand
I
individual.
think there's a good chance they were functional. They might have been, I don't know, look, resonators. I don't know what they were. It's one of those. It's that. I get into the zone of like, well, how do you define a technology that you don't understand or you haven't discovered yet? It just is this magic.
No, you did not.
We'll
That is
know
not
more
real
about
life.
technology
Are you
and science in
serious?
hundreds of thousand years, so we can from that deduct that there are realms of technology.
Are you
and
serious
science
right
that we
now?
don't understand today. And I think the explanation for some of these stuff, maybe even the pyramids, maybe the sites, maybe these ancient things we're looking at, might actually, the answers might exist in those
It's
realms
insane.
that are outside of our understanding right now. And so it makes it really hard to
I
speculate.
can't believe they
When you
actually
look
did
at
that.
the vases, I go, okay,
Were you watching a
there
movie or
seems to be
something?
a consistency in terms of
Were you
form,
watching Steven screaming?
shapes,
No, I'm joking. I'm not saying he sounds like a woman.
general shapes, the rounder ones, the hourglass shaped ones, the taller ones.
Yeah, like,
Scale varies up and down. The lug handles.
did someone
are really
report you?
interesting
Did someone
because
snitch on you?
you can imagine, and forget
There's
the
a lot of
holes in the
snitches,
lug
man.
handles, I think the holes were at
You know what we realized?
vases.
I think a student snitched on me in the University of Miami for not wearing a mask, and she she smiled to my face. Oh, I didn't see her smile because she was wearing a mask, but
We see that somebody made them.
I think she was the one that snitched on me.
They were definitely used as vases.
Yeah.
But whether or not they were
It was the
originally vases, I
sheep,
don't know,
man.
because some of these vases
It's not the dogs or the
like the ones
pigs,
up
it's
here,
the
I've got
sheep.
up here, they're upside down because you can't actually stand them up the other way around. Like they have it, they're on like a point. There's some that are balanced really well, but this one up here next to this
Oh
pyramid
man, dude.
has a point on it. So it's an upside down vase. But the lug handles are interesting because I look at those and go, would that function as a cam
Yeah,
lock?
really.
Imagine you stuff that into something and twist it. It's like a cam lock, and it might function that way. Are they resonators? Is there some other? I can imagine a realm of possibility where they are functional. Maybe they're just parts of a bigger system, a bigger machine.
Yesterday I saw a guy
Take it apart, then fan
park
it
his
out,
car
you know,
and get out and pee into a snowbank outside of Moxie's, and a cop saw him and like stopped him and started like investigating and searching his car and shit. I was like, these fucking policemen. Like, sometimes you just gotta go. I mean, it was really dumb of him to do that. He did look like an immigrant. Not that immigrants are terrible, but like, you can't just fucking pee in a random snowbank right beside fucking Moxie's and fuck the police, huh? Hell, I shouldn't have had to pee.
Yeah, I just think it's pure speculation, and I recognise that. I try not to speculate too hard about this stuff because it's like at that point it's pure imagination. But
That's why you're coming on our show.
Yeah, yeah.
This is where you do all the speculation.
yeah, well, I'm going to write a book. I'm going to speculate the fuck in the book. So.
Yeah, right.
But-
Good.
I'm not comparing them to insulators as though electrical. I'm just talking
got it.
about the idea.
I get it.
See that form.
Yeah, and it's the example I've used. You and I know what this is. Like we can look at this and this black piece of
Yeah, really.
plastic or glass that if you bang it with a hammer.
How do you feel bad for the guy?
You and I, we
Bottles, man. You gotta have bottles now.
Because we know what touchscreens are. And
Anyways.
wireless networking, cell phones,
Is it delivery
microphones,
driver?
cameras, all this stuff that makes up in our head what a cell phone does and what it is or smartphone.
Yes, I said it.
You go back in
I
time,
peed in a bottle delivering Uber Eats. I said it.
something like this is not
It is
powered on
said.
or anything, and they're just going, what is that thing? It's like a shiny piece of glass, and you just don't
Otherwise, it's too inefficient, man.
what it is. And it's possible, I think, that when we look at some of these artifacts in the science, that we're in the same position. We don't have the context to truly understand
Fucking
what
tomato
these
jars, man.
are. And then maybe once we get
Warn
that
us
context, we
about-
understand what the still
We're singing about. No, don't do that, dude.
things are. Yeah,
Don't do that.
we might have the
That's not really something to like aspire towards.
them into the context and understand it better, but we certainly won't be able to do that if we don't look at them with an open mind and investigate them to the limits of our capability, right? If we just go, it's all ceremonial, it's all just artistic, it's just accidental that they're precise. We know what they were doing, these are just canopic vessels or vases for oils and ointments and shit, and that's it. We're never going to learn about it. You have to kind of open up your mind and go, let's actually figure it out. Let's look at the engineering behind them. And I think the same thing goes for the boxes.
I might try the
We should just be open-minded about it and try and figure it out.
I'm just joking. Oh, thank God.
You know, could the boxes like
See, like with this strap, we're getting glass every time. Not every time, but I mean,
All these objects have similar function, like the box.
this is way more enjoyable. I think we have one PB left with the strap
I mean, they're not obviously they're not round. But yeah, these could be.
before we go full degen.
That's Chris Dunn's theory, right? The Heinholz resonators, they're big ones, and they do scale.
That's my
Some of these vases certainly scale, but these
my interpretation.
yeah, I don't know.
We're doing pretty well though. We're warm up already.
Make them like thimble size. Yeah,
They
that's
do,
the
they're
other thing I was gonna say.
thumbnails,
They have these
exactly.
tiny ones. Yeah.
I went and looked at those again.
that doesn't make any sense as a because in the
Thanks for being here.
we're like, oh yeah, these are for gravy.
I missed all of you, my friends. No homo. Not there's anything wrong with being gay.
Little tiny freaking thimble size.
I'm just gonna shut up
I also would love to. It would be, you know, you've talked
before I
about
dig
that
myself
one
further
tiny
in the
grave,
hole.
the Mesolithic
Yeah,
era grave,
Band Island.
9,000, 14,000. Where are those now? Like,
I
when was
don't
this
know.
raised?
Yeah, I mean, you'd have to go. I mean, I do want to, in fact, in February, when we go, I think we are going to go. You guys haven't been to the
Come on, man.
One yet? I
What?
think so. We're going to go. That's where those pictures are for Toshka. People get bent out of shape about Toshka. I've had some people like, I can't find any reference to what you're talking about with Toshka. Like, it's because there's images that it's at the ASMR Museum. Like, that's the records for that. It's not online. And we might be able to track some of that other stuff down.
Yeah,
But
that's
Toshka's
great.
kind of an outlier, and it's
Mentally,
one
yeah.
example of many. Like even Adam Young, the guy I was talking about before, he's got a big one that's really nice, and it's the provenance on it is impeccable. But it was brought out of Egypt by the Czechoslovakian ambassador in the late 1800s, and it was found in a site that was later carbon dated to like 9 or 10,000 BC. So you're still, I mean, this is a big.
We're actually really hopeful to maybe get a completion this session, honestly.
Where it came from.
I'm really
It's not
hopeful.
made in any northern times because
It's just
it
so
was
simple.
taken by the Czechoslovakian ambassador in the late
Just do it.
1800s. They weren't making
So
it.
the Providence
I
question.
just need to be clean and fast.
I think so. Look, I mean, my.
I know how to do everything
definitely
else.
wanted to address it because people have asked about it. I think logically you can work
Just have to
through
do
the
it.
provenance question just by looking at what that vase
So I'm hopeful.
represents, how precise it is, how difficult it is to make that.
I'm way more hopeful than I thought when I started. Like, we're going really well.
Given that it has, so the original, the OG vase that we looked at, the very first vase goes back to the 1980s.
God.
We have, and I go to some length to try and explain, like, this is the the one you're holding. This is
Insane.
the nature of the antiquities market, right? Like, not everything is like perfectly provenance because Egypt gets involved. Museums want to take it. Like, stuff was taken when it shouldn't have been taken at times. Other times, a lot of stuff is legit, but some of it is like has come through, not always legal means over the last several hundred years. And it's in these family collections that turn up in estate sales and whatever else. So, but even in the 80s, like there's very few people, and it's a very open question for whether or not people would have actually been able to make that degree of precision in granite in the 80s, and at
It's just never there, right?
burns out tools it would be tremendously expensive.
It's too painful. I can't do that strat. It's too much, man.
It wouldn't have been worth
It's
it.
too painful.
I mean, honestly, since we've done these vase videos, I know I've driven up, these videos have driven up the price of vases. You can just ask Matt, like,
It's
the
too
guy's
much.
been buying them, he's like, God damn it, like, he talks to these antiquities dealers, like, yeah, we're getting
too
so
degen,
many
man.
inquiries about vases now. Like, all the prices have doubled or tripled for these vases that are on the market. People are generally more interested in, like, statues or faces, like the hieroglyphs and shit. These plain, unadorned vases weren't particularly interesting for a lot of people. So they weren't very expensive. And
You missed out on an exit strategy.
me, I
Not
definitely.
buying bases before publishing these.
Yeah, fuck me. I've kicked my own ass so hard over the last year because of that. I'm like, I so should have bought a few vases and then tried to sell them because we did. I would have made 2-3 times easy. Like,
Yeah.
I'm so stupid, and I didn't think about it, but that's what happened. And
Well, you're a terrible, terrible grifter, Ben.
I am. That's right.
You're
yes.
really bad at it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Apparently, according to my critics, I'm in it for the money, and I'm just grifting and making this shit up. But damn, if I've missed some opportunities along the way.
Thanks for being here.
How to do that? Just to grift on people. Yeah.
Oh, let's take a. This is fantastic. Let's take a break. Come back. We'll keep talking about the bases. Be right back.
No, look, what? Check the tape. Sorry, I'm still sick.
All right, we're back. You didn't stop recording, right? No.
Please, come on. Please.
We're back, folks.
This is fast. It's nice. It's a nice run.
Are we
It's a really nice run.
Base top?
We can.
I
Well,
mean,
yeah, I wanted to get
Fuck
a little
off.
deeper
did
into
they hold
We'll
flowers?
take it.
or did they hold
Did you
explosives?
see the some of the they held pencils? Did you not see the Photoshop that some of the guys on my Discord did of me? I have to show it.
Okay, okay.
I'll pull it up.
Not bad.
You guys
Pretty bad dark room. That's what we want. I didn't think they'd be there. I think I just have to grind out and anticipate that they're there. You saw how late I shot. I got 2 hits there. Imagine I was full health.
I'm not gonna talk about flowers. I don't know.
Or
You could put
thank you for ringing. Yo, thank you, bro.
Yeah. I mean, hey, I drank
Big ones.
This was a gift from old Aaron,
Yep.
and immediately I drank wine. After. Good wine does.
It's fast though.
I think I saw that.
I might get trolled by a guard though from the start.
Just a thought on this radial transversal pattern. If I have this correct, because this is, I've had to struggle to try to understand this.
Sorry. I'm gonna stop sharing it because I do want to talk about the radio traversals.
He's showing, for those of you who are listening, he's showing pictures that he
I hate this game.
made of Ghost, the famous scene in Ghost where he's helping her do the pottery.
Patrick Swayze behind me and
Patrick Swayze behind Ben.
on a desk full of vases.
How did I miss that upload?
A bunch of clowns. But yeah. You got
Check the tape on that one.
radial traversal. That is.
Yeah, so the idea that it's that you can pick, like, say the designer decides on a size or something, or one or two aspects of the object. From there, they gain their unit of measure.
Always get shot past it, man. Like, oh, because I get stuck at the glass like a fool, and then I get boosted way past it. Like, it's just so dumb.
It's a ratio.
Whatever.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. So your unit
How did I miss that upload though? Like, what?
per item that you're making.
This is fun. This is fun.
Definitely the base unit of
We're getting back into it.
one base isn't the same as what you might
As the
find
base
on the
unit
other.
for the others,
Right,
but
We're fucking just
the ratio is consistent.
pulls us right back in, eh?
Measure at a certain rate. Then you use that in one base. It's consistent across all the
See, like,
So,
you go to a different
that was so dumb.
different length of unit, but if
Do I just do I gotta look at the laser guy?
so what
Like, that was just
is
a dumb
fixed ratio between
big room.
curvatures. And there's lots of
Then you
other
get boosted past them once you finally get through the glass. It's like
we have found the
so dumb.
same fixed ratio between the curvatures. So for example,
all I'm saying is that the base unit is different.
yeah,
ratio is
yeah, I
the
think
same.
so. Well, and we can talk about the base unit as as Mark thinks he might have discovered on the OG base, the one on the desk on front of you there, the model. I've got like 5 or 6 of them up
What's
here.
the clip? I want to watch the clip.
Yeah, so that base unit, if that's how you calculate it, that would not be the same unit of measure that we might find on different vases. Yes,
Right.
That's right. But because
it reminds me
it's scales.
of the cubit.
Oh, you clipped it.
Reminds me of the cubit.
Check the
It's got
tape.
holes
Yes,
in it.
baby. Let's see. How do we go back? How do we go back? We can see it.
It's like,
Yes, you're the man, dude.
wrong about this, but I
Let's
seem
look
to
at the
remember
input display.
them looking
Yes,
for,
check
like,
the
what's
tape.
base unit
Here
of
we go.
in, like, say, up here.
When did so the Z button?
And they keep finding like different sized cubits.
Yeah.
You see that? You see I spammed the Z. I spammed it twice.
Cubit is the same.
I'm not gonna go frame by frame on that. Thank you, Moonraker. You validated me.
Like they didn't have, but they didn't necessarily need or utilize.
Thanks, bro. You saw that Z? The Z lit up like a Christmas tree, man.
They used the base system of ratios.
Thanks, bro.
Yes.
So my question is, can you have a
That's my favorite use for the input display, to be honest. Not even for others, just for myself. For my own validation.
a fixed measuring system?
Well, I would think that it, just like the basis, it would be per tool.
I think they had a measuring system. I do think they had a measuring system. They must have had a measuring system. Now, I don't know that the measuring
This is so
system
fast.
is necessarily encoded in the vases, but I think that the basis for their mathematics
Yes, that clip's amazing.
is encoded in the bases.
I gotta go frame by frame to see if I just missed it, right? But
That ratio
I might have.
exists between the curvatures of
I clearly did
the vases
somehow.
in any system of mathematics that you wanted to apply to it, because the ratios don't shift, right? You can bananas or imperial or metric or whatever. It's done irrespective of the system of measurement, and they must have had a system of measurement because we know that we know that the vases are very, very
Come on,
accurately
man.
represent what is the mathematical design behind them. So if you take and this is one of the experiments that Mark did that I think is a real telling point about these vases, is that once he discovered this fixed ratio, the radial traversal pattern is a square root of 6/2 to the power of n, and then n scales up and down.
No.
Right, and that gives you your
This is
base
really
circle
fast.
sizes, and on that original vase you've got something like 11 or 12 different curvatures that range from 42 millimeters to 1.1 millimeters. Like that's the radius of the curvatures. 1.1 millimeters. Like, good luck drawing that.
I
shit
hate
by
this
hand.
fucking game, man.
But there's at least 12 degrees of mathematical interrelationship because you have 12 different curves that all fit that exact ratio pattern up and down that scale, and that's primarily what that vase is made of, almost exclusively. And the only exceptions to that are other significant ratios that have to do with pi and phi, and we can talk about those in a minute. But once you recognise that pattern, and then he then used that pattern to create a mathematical model. Went into CAD, said, all right, I'm going to just purely use the math that I've discovered in this vase, and I'm going to create a mathematical model based on the math only. And he creates a model on it, and then he compares the scan of the original vase to the mathematical model that he's created, and the median radial deviation is something like 6 microns or less. So it's like 3 or 4 microns. So you're basically within the tolerance of the scan. Like, we don't know at that point whether that's an inaccuracy in the scan or it's damage on the artifact. It's basically perfect, and you have a lot of. That's the median deviation. You have plenty of measurements where it's better than that. Right. That's the median, and so it's like the vase is a very accurate representation of this mathematical design. So yes, they must have been measuring this stuff pretty accurately because that's obviously that's.
Yeah. So I understand your point. Yeah. It shows pretty clearly that they had a system. A unit of measure, a base unit of measure. Yeah. They had a system. Is it discernible by measuring multiple of the bases? Like, do you think it can be uncovered? Well, the difference between the scales. Yeah.
Maybe. I mean, so we have yet to do enough analysis to get to that point. So, for example, and I can walk you through this if you want me to look at the slides. It's probably a good way to show.
Sure.
Let me quickly. So it's probably a good way to show
so while you're trying to pull that up, I'm just saying because of the reason I'm interested in this is if they had a system of measure, it's another way you can look at the accuracy that they were working to. So if we can say, okay, here's the math that defines these vases, it seems to define them every time. It may be adjusted a little bit based on what basic shape they wanted. If they wanted the more round ones, if they wanted the tall ones. But basically, here's the math, and then if we can define also, and then you can compare the actual objects themselves or the scans of the objects to the mathematical model, and you can say, wow, look at the accuracy here.
Man.
If we can discern a unit of measure and be like, okay,
come on, man.
This is the system that they were using. Then we can also check it against that.
Yeah. And
get another dimension of accuracy, right? Like they were doing this to this specific length. They achieve that length every time, or within these tolerances.
Well, we're certainly seeing commonality in the ratios, not only in the ratios between curvatures matching this radial traversal pattern, but also the encoding of pi and phi and like geometric and
Moonraker, I'm so happy you made that clip.
Geometric constants in terms of pi, and then phi.
Because that's exactly the reason.
So
why input display is the best, because it just makes you feel better about yourself. I think I learned that one from Ninja. It's the game was wrong. Yeah, exactly. I have video evidence. I will submit that to the complaints department. Thing is, nobody cares, right? Like, nobody cares. Only me. And you, apparently, maybe. I appreciate it.
What his analysis is, and I finally kind of understood exactly.
It's the game who's yes.
Because he did finally get to what he thought was the base unit of measure for this vase. Because when you ultimately,
you can see it. You can see. I even hold it for a while. I do a double. I definitely saw it. Like I watched the clip twice, but definitely saw it engage and then disengage and then engage again and disengage again. But it was pretty much over when you get shot into that friggin' thing to the corner. Pretty much over.
So these significant ratios just pop out at you when you look at it through this lens of this one particular base unit of measure, which also happened to be a really interesting number because it's 18.739 millimeters.
It's like
It's the it's the wavelength of it's the wavelength
This game,
of
bro.
16 gigahertz.
This game. It's too slow.
Radio,
It's too slow.
electromagnetic wave.
I'm too far
In a
back
vacuum,
too.
specifically
But
16
let's see.
gigahertz. Like,
I'm like full health, I think.
What's significant about
well, it's
I might try a full health
this
run.
could be just a pure coincidence, but it does happen to 16 gigahertz exactly, like 16.0. So it's 16 gigahertz exactly, and we use that range of.
See, like, this is fun.
I mean, it's a microwave range of using satellite communications today. Like it's a very, it's like the, it seems to be pretty accurate. Like there's a lot of room for movement outside of like 16.0 gigahertz. You know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah.
I don't know what the significance of it is,
So
but
they
it
have the second-
exactly matches 16 gigahertz, the wavelength of the 16 gigahertz electromagnetic wave traveling in a vacuum, the speed of light.
Right, so that requires the speed of light, that you know about the
Right.
electromagnetic spectrum, and that was the next question.
Well, I mean, if they had, because how, I mean, like, I don't know, that one's tough for me to do.
Within 2 miles.
It's tough because hertz is oscillations per second. And so, like, nowadays, we're measuring a second by, like, we're calibrating it to,
Cesium atom.
Yeah, well,
so it's like,
it's an electromagnetic wave. And
We're doing
you're
pretty
right,
well, we're doing
right,
pretty
16
well.
gigahertz is just
Because
the
the
hertz measurement is
electromagnetics-
arbitrary. Yeah, I see.
just what I'm
I was
saying,
pretty
the
slow, though.
electromagnetic spectrum, I mean, it's
I was
it's
too
a-
slow.
It's a spectrum. It's analog. So
You want like like a sub 56
Right.
there.
And we are arbitrarily
Pass
deciding
away.
what's a round number. Yeah. We're arbitrarily deciding what's a round number. Yeah,
A 55 pass away there would be really
well,
good.
it's just, I've never claimed that it means anything other than it's just an interesting fact that it happens to match almost
The
exactly
glass didn't open.
a 16 gigahertz.
But well, the length of it is based on the second, right? I mean, the second is a geo-definable.
It is.
Time.
Yeah. Seconds, and our time measurement does go back some distance, and it is a little related to.
Come on, really? Are you
Yeah, but
serious
I mean,
right now?
To define the second fine enough,
Like what?
16 gigahertz wavelength.
Oh my god, that was my fault, but it's just so dumb.
Gazing
Yeah,
at the
looking at
stars.
shadows on
That's
the
what
ground.
I'm saying.
Yeah.
Like we're talking about like measuring, like the I don't know, however they do it now with it. It's like
It's the vibrations of a cesium atom
Yeah.
inside of
Yeah.
it. Yeah, something
Well,
like that.
I think what.
so I
Yeah.
yeah. I'll say.
I
But
mean,
I-
it's
okay,
just
but-
it's just a coincidence. It could be a
Well, I'm
coincidence.
just saying, like, this is what you have to do. You have to say, okay, this is the system they're using. What is required to know this system? I was going to ask the same thing about the map. Right? Like, we're constantly told about,
I don't know. It's the video that's doing this.
some of this math, and it was
Jesus Christ.
9,000 BC.
Right.
Not saying that they didn't. I'm just trying to say like the first thing that came to mind when it comes to like saying the wave
Yeah, thanks, bro.
from the electromagnetic
It was on their end, not on my end.
is that it's
I know there's already an echo, but like,
choose any wavelength. Like you could just say, here's the base unit of measure. There is a electromagnetic wave that is that length exactly.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
What is it? Right. So
insane.
that's why I asked what's the significance of 16 gigahertz.
There's none typically.
Now hertz is hertz is
Bitcoin. Can you imagine Bitcoin becomes the main currency?
So then
You know how like
one way to actually
screwed
do that is to
senior
very
citizens would be?
precisely define the second. We have done that in a certain
Like it would just be so
That's not
tragic.
what is this actually?
Yeah, it's an arbitrary, like, what is a round number?
Like I mean, I'm not an extreme capitalist, right? Like I think there should be some regulation on money transaction, right? Like there's like otherwise you're just gonna have people with this fucking fake internet money. Like what does it even mean? Yeah, like what does it even mean? Come on, man. Like I heard like El Salvador has that. Like dude,
It's literally, it's like, hey, this just so happens to equal this.
Yeah, of course.
People in El Salvador,
There's
like,
there's several equivalencies that show up that this is a very
what does it even
particular
mean?
and important ratio, which is the radius.
I've been to Panama, and man, let me tell you, I mean, Panama's pretty advanced, developed the city, but dude, I went rural Panama. Oh my god, dude. We're talking fucking like
or the diameter of the neck or the radius of the foot or these other
in the
things,
jungle.
you start to see these significant ratios appear, which
You're
is
telling me
like,
that
okay, this
fucking
is
fake
pi,
infinite money's
base
gonna
units
be
of measure, this is
how
pi,
they
base units of measures, pi squared,
buy
etc.
and sell
Like there's all these different
flour and
pi and
sugar?
pi. I don't think you can't claim that this seems to be designed in. You can
I'm
find
just
pi and
joshing,
pi,
man. I'm just joking, man.
in some things in nature or in an artwork, but when you
Wow.
get to an artifact like this where you have 12
Scene.
degrees of mathematical interrelationship
I
between
guess so.
all the
I guess
ratios
if the other money is destroyed, you're right.
you've got dozens
Right.
and dozens of significant ratios appearing that show up in, using geometrical constants like pi and universal constants like phi. It stretches credulity to suggest that that's accidental. I mean, it literally completely impossible, I think, at some point.
That was the same animation on my 142 PB. Maybe it's a sign.
Far more likely for you to wake up one morning and have an entirely new universe, a quantum universe sprouting out of your left nostril.
I hate this game,
than
bros.
it would be for
I hate this fucking game.
just designed because some dude was rubbing on it with rocks and sand. And
Sorry, I'm trying to be a little more
ended up with
positive.
this device, which is, I think honestly when the discussion gets to this level about these artifacts, I think it's like we've moved the needle at that point, right? Because
I'm actually having a lot of fun.
about-
Because I enjoy this game quite a lot.
Literally, they're explained by guys banging on them with rocks and sticks and sand.
Well,
And
I mean,
come on,
yeah.
Real quick, are you looking up the gigahertz thing?
Yeah.
Okay, real quick, we'll go back to that.
Oh, I want
One idea
Let's
is
go.
that like if you had a tool set. So
Oh, come on. It was like a frame away. Whatever.
is the one using
It's just
the
so
radial
dumb.
transversal pattern. Yeah.
It's really fast, though.
Is a series of radii,
I hate this game, bros.
and the way they step up in size is by this pattern. So then the guy making the vase only has to design
I got a sidle.
elements.
I gotta be a sidler.
Experiment.
Can we clutch it?
If you set up, you had a set of tools for your lathe that were sized up according to this radial transversal pattern, and you came up with, then what would your design options be if you're like, okay, well I want the knob to be this big, then I'm gonna cut this edge and cut that edge. So it would be interesting to see like how many different designs
Scam.
would you get this sort of
Such a scam.
ratio represented in ways. So that you
Oh,
see
we got a
this
sidle.
idea-
It's over. It's over anyways.
Well,
I'm
so
dead.
not some of the stuff that shows pi and pi does not.
So those are
You see how late that glass was? Like, what?
Because they
You're like, what? Like, why?
that's
kind of what I'm getting at. Is that
Oh, whatever.
you start out with this set of tools, and then you have to like come up with a design
well,
you're trying to show.
well, so
Man, this level, dudes and dudettes, like this level, man.
look at the design and what it would take to design this vase, and given that there are curvatures,
We're having good runs,
1.1
though.
millimeter radii.
It's the glass. Like, why was this so late? Because I shot 2 bullets there, maybe?
Do that by hand.
It's just too much, man.
So you can scale it up. Sure. You can make a piece of sand. Yep, piece of paper as big as the room you're sitting in. You might be able to draw it. You still got to scale that thing down and figure out. And let's not forget that it's been accurately represented to within a few microns. That design was executed in granite.
Right. Yeah.
Very accurate.
That's amazing.
So there's you get to this point of okay, so how do you? It turns out that the best way to actually represent that vase is mathematically. So it's with formula. It's not by like a drawing or a reference.
This fucking guy, man.
You can't draw it down that size. You can't get the curvatures down that size. So it's done mathematically. And now the trick that Mark gets to is like you need.
Come on.
We don't
Please.
have any other way of transferring like a mathematical design or a design like that to an
Like, I don't even know what they're gonna
something that
be doing,
produces
man.
lathe operating outputs. And
That's pretty fast.
There's no other mechanism or phenomena or animal or process or anything
That's pretty
that
fast.
we know of in our entire
It's a pretty good run.
as a human race, all of our combined knowledge, that does that, except the one thing that we call a Turing machine,
Yeah.
which is a device that can basically take data, and operate on that data based on a set of preset conditions, like change of state, and then that drives a specific output. Like that requires a Turing machine. It could be analog, it could be digital. Like you can make these things pneumatically or hydraulically or mechanically. You do it electronically.
Please.
Yeah, I mean, going from mathematics
To an output, right? So that's the other part of the system. There seems to be a Turing machine involved in this process somewhere, and logically, if you follow the design process and what we see as the output, it's hard to deny that. I get a lot of flag on the comments on that video earlier, since I did make a video called were ancient computers used to design stuff? Yeah. It's not clickbait, because that's exactly where
What a rush, man. I feel it in my heart.
IBM laptop.
Like, it's crazy rush playing this game.
I don't know, but it
Like,
might
that's
be
too
some other,
slow.
Mechanical or
What?
what is it? What's the
Why was it that slow?
anti-conveyor mechanism?
Yeah.
Who
It's
knows?
just
There's
gas.
obviously some mechanical sophistication going on. In the past, we've seen it. And it's quite possible that some of this stuff could have been done. It's still a fairly sophisticated Turing machine.
It's
not
too slow,
something
man.
that's like a simple, couple of different transistors or pneumatic transistors or something. It's more complicated than that, but it may not have been electronic. There's lots of other ways of potentially solving that problem, but it does as far as we know, that the only way you can achieve
That was not a good
this
run.
while working from a design, as indeed it seems
fine.
like that's the case with this vase.
We can do better.
And now
What?
again, I'd remind everyone, we're leaps and bounds beyond butt flap wearing dudes rubbing on stones with sticks and rocks.
Right.
Like, come on.
That's what's been so fascinating about watching this process is you go from the people like, well, they did it with rocks. and
Snapple
stick,
because it has the
like, "Ah, I
widest
could
rim.
easily do this on a
That's
ledge,"
fucking hilarious.
right? And then we're like, well, I mean, maybe you need a 5-axis something or other.
No way, man. You go outside, the
Need a
cops are gonna
computer
get you,
to
man.
translate it into a 5-axis.
Yeah, we didn't even talk about the thing that you raised at the very point, at the very start, which is
Got
the
you in a
area
bottle,
between the
man.
vase handles.
Yeah.
Which is, yes, it is. All the analysis, and we did this in Danville. We tested this on a few vases. Yes, it shows the same level of.
Obviously
precision
not while you're
as the
driving,
vase,
but
which makes it very challenging
Yeah,
to explain how you
takes
can
the
do
lathe
that.
out.
It does. Yeah.
obviously I didn't do it on
Well, it
stream.
gives you two options. It either says, well, it's a 5-axis machine, so it's made in a single like one machine does it, which is like a 5-axis mill, or the process that made this could handle.
We're doing pretty well, man. We're doing well.
Positional calibration and tool changes better than we can, because today when we do stuff like this, where you have to put it in a different process with a different tool, it introduces errors that you see in the final result, and we account for that in our design processes. And this is something that these actual metrologists and literal rocket engineers and jet engine people that are working on this stuff have drilled into me. Like, I don't work in that field, but they tell me, we account for that stuff in our work. Like, we know that when we have to take this piece to a different machine to do a different process, it's going to be accurate relative to the other stuff, and we account for that. But that's not what we see on these vases, which is really fascinating.
Yeah.
All right, what's up with the gigahertz?
Well, I'm just the reason. I mean, laughing at me but I know I'm not laughing at this. Is it's deserved laughing. But this is the thing. Like,
Please.
I find through
What?
and I'm sure you guys know this, like studying this stuff for a long time, that these people, that whoever this was that designed these kind of things, they always had multiple lines of connection to. Like, let's say you find some specific number in their measuring system or in an object or whatever, you find that it's connected in 5 different ways to 6 other things, right? In terms of numbers. And so I'm just like, I'm interested in and so if it's possible that this 16 gigahertz wavelength is in here on purpose,
Why?
is it significant? Yeah, is it And if we don't know what the significance is, that could lead to new discovery. Right? Like, why were they connecting it to it? Because it's going to connect to 5 other things.
That's what I was asking. What's the significance of it?
Well, I just looked it up. Like, what are we looking at here?
Man.
So I've got physics.phi.astr.gsu.edu. Okay, so they have this,
Like, I just fucking ran at
this
them.
website.
Like,
under
fuck
the
them.
text talking about all these different bands. Under microwaves and radar, which the frequencies are 1.6 to 30 gigahertz, so the 16 is in there.
Just fucking
They
go.
say, in interactions with matter, microwave radiation primarily acts to produce molecular rotation and torsion. And microwave absorption manifests itself by heat. Molecular structure information can be obtained from the analysis of molecular rotational spectra. The most precise way to determine bond lengths and angles of molecules. Microwave radiation is also used in electron spin resonance spectroscopy. So now you're talking about, you know,
They're measuring the center.
bad at that.
Yeah.
I'm so bad at the sidle.
you can measure molecules with it.
I'm terrible at the sidle. The right strafe is really bad too.
Spinning molecules.
Like 59, that wasn't even fast.
Figure this out again, and I'm gonna
No glass.
ham-fist my way through this, but there was something
pretty
about
fast.
the speed of a hydrogen atom that seemed related to
Not
this
fast
that they were
enough.
excited about that
That's-
I didn't grok from Mark's report, but they did, and I need to find out specifically what they would work up about.
That's what I thought. That's why I was looking this up, because I remembered this idea. So there was this idea with SETI, the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence.
just
One of the bands that you want to study.
It's
when you're
just
looking for
gas.
signals in space is this specific one that has to do with hydrogen. Let me see if I can find out what that is.
And that, I remember Alex and Nick talking about that a while back. Damn. Yeah, I'm getting those guys. They're definitely going to do more podcasts. I want them to do some more talking.
Yeah.
They're going to do some conferences and stuff. I know Alex is interested in getting out in front of this and doing more public-facing stuff, which I would be very happy for him to do because he's the expert on this stuff.
Oh, I can't find a simple answer to this. Let's see. Is that, yeah, 1.4 billion hertz. So that's not the same. Yeah. So anyway, it's just interesting. Like, if this frequency has some other significance, and maybe we don't even know what it is, but I find that these people, you know, it just seems interesting to me that the measurements and the
Shit, I
systems
shot
and
late.
the ratios and stuff that you find in objects like this are always pointing at other things. They connect to each other in multiple ways.
This game is so brutal.
And I go back to the I go back to the question also. Like,
I
what
love
is the
this
level
level,
of
man.
math we're talking about?
This level's just so good, man.
Now, so we're discussing
It's the
like,
best.
They have
It's the
computers,
best.
Like what kind of machinery? What
love it.
precision did they have to have in their manufacturing process to have an end result of objects that are this precise in imprecise materials? But then, but another question that goes along with that is what is their
Oh no.
what's their corresponding abstract level of precision? You know, like what was the level of their math?
Wow, that was terrible.
Must have been very high. Like, what's the level of their ability to make a measurement system? That's why I was interested in a base measuring system, because like the
Oh, I thought I hit him. Can you imagine if I hit him there?
ability to check
That'd be
which
amazing.
measuring system you have is reflected in objects that you make.
That's right.
It is what it
Yeah,
is.
it seems like I think we've just discovered a mathematical principle on a basis, and they certainly very accurately represented those in the artifacts themselves, such that we could figure out what they were, and then actually make a measurement and say how close did you get, and it turns out they were really damn close. So,
Really close.
well,
In materials, they're
very
difficult. Yeah,
So,
they're non-homogeneous. Yeah.
It's the dumbest materials that you could frankly try to do that shit in, but it happens to be the material that's going to last the longest as well. Like, you make these things out of steel or metal or anything else, it's not going to last.
Which they may have.
Well, they may have. Well, that's right. Well, the Antikythera mechanism, this was interesting about things like, not that I'm comparing the Antikythera mechanism to this, but it's a great example. Just metal. Like, it's stupid that the only reason we have that thing is because it was
So
on the
dumb,
bottom of
man.
the ocean, being degraded by salt water. Like, it would have disappeared eventually, but we
So
found it.
dumb.
And there's clearly evidence that there were probably lots of these things, but the ones that were on land that were found, metal just gets taken, it either it oxidises oxidizes, it erodes, or people take it and cast it into whatever tool they want for because it's so damn precious. I keep trying to tell people that. I said, where are the tools? I'm like, we don't. You can't. You could fit all of the metal that they found. Discount gold and silver, which are really no good for tools and weapons. But you take the actual metals that are useful in ancient Egypt. You could fit the whole thing.
Tie it onto the end of your spear, dude.
Gold and metal, gold and silver. Yeah.
You find that tool tip.
Exactly. Yeah. Or you sharpen it up, recast it.
Yeah. This on the end of my stick.
Exactly. Yeah.
God,
and that's
man.
what happened to it. It got turned, it got used, it got melted, it got taken because it's precious, and there's so little of it that's been found. You could fit all of the stuff from ancient Egypt over all the
What?
years.
Like, where? Why?
Such a small room
Who?
of metal stuff they actually found. Right. And again, discounted
Did they hit him?
silver because they found
Oh, I passed him away. Well, maybe not. Let's go with it.
it's
Let's see what happens.
There's a pile of it under.
Did you see that?
Yeah.
Let's see if this actually works. Can you imagine?
I don't want to get in there.
A hall records under there that no one has entered.
That's right.
Yeah.
Dudes died trying to get in there. So what? Let's try again. That was the 60s. Let's go again.
All right. Break time.
It's not gonna work. I was grinding way too much there. I gotta improve my hallway so much, dude. Like, it's
Yeah,
ridiculous.
welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Brothers of the Servant podcast, Uncharted X, Swapcast,
I
actually.
was just messing around and like grinding. I was grinding way too much there. Whatever, we gotta practice it.
Precision
So the woman sees when she goes. Don't say
So you pulled up a graphic earlier. Let's take a quick look at that. I know we went through it already. But
Dude, Ninja's a Chad, man.
the details, and then we can.
Don't say that. He might see this comment. He's a Chad, dude.
But let's
Can you see this?
Yes.
Dude, he's a fucking
Gonna blow it up. Is that-
turbo Chad,
It
man.
doesn't change anything. Yeah.
Yeah, so what we were looking at, this kind of relates back to what we were saying before about these significant ratios and their mathematical system. Like we know that, at a minimum, it involved concepts.
Oh god, this game.
Phi, even the radian, and in fact I'll back it up one just to talk about the radian because they also use the concept of the radian quite elegantly in this vase, and we've seen it in other vases too. And people don't know what a radian is. It's a simple way of measuring angles on the circle. It's a much more elegant way than our sort of 360 degrees. It's and you can see the graphic here. If you
I hate this
can't
game.
see it, I'll describe it. You take the radius of a circle, you apply the length of that radius to the circumference of the circle, and then the angle that makes. So if you sort of cut that pie shape out of a circle, that angle in the center is 1 radian, right? So
Yeah.
so you have 1 radian, 2 radians,
You know what I
3
mean?
radians, and then
I feel like I
5
can't
radians is half a circle,
do
0.14.
the natural stuck because my consistency
Exactly half a circle, and then there are 2
post
radians
pause
in a full circle in terms of
is
degrees.
dismal.
But this 1 radian arc is a again it's a geometric principle. that
I think I must
relates to things
complete
like
one out of every like 50 post pause runs.
in the design of the vases. They use the 1 radian arc quite extensively
Like,
in this particular vase. They use
maybe.
it to describe the angle of the top part of the vase, the actual angle of the
So can you imagine
the
grinding out
sides
the
of
natural
vase
stuck
relative to the
and dying
circles
away
that the maximum internal diameter
98% of the time?
flower of life patterns that mark
Like, it
originally
just doesn't make
started
any
from this
sense.
vase. They're also the 1 radian arc is also
So I gotta do the force stuck, I think.
the location of
It's the only non-degen way.
relative to the other geometric features on the vase. It just
It's the
plays
only way.
It's just an example of
And I might get lucky with a no body armor run with full
and
health.
we actually see this on other vases too. Like there's
That's what I'm going for right now. Like, I'm doing natural. I'm doing.
has the use of
You know what I mean?
1/3
You see what I'm going
radian
for.
arcs and 1 radian arcs and some of the other ones.
Dark skies, the
We can back
maroon
up and
skies.
talk about kind of the circle of life. And it was the discovery of these
It's really forces. No way.
sacred
It's
geometric
terrible.
patterns that led to the discovery of
It's
the
terrible, man.
radial traversal pattern and that ratio between the curvatures. So it basically started with the looking at the circles of the maximum internal diameter and the maximum external diameter of the vase, and then creating these circle of life patterns based on those, where those circles were. And we found that those patterns described a lot of the other features of the vase: the top of the vase, the bottom of the vase, the foot of the vase, and the
Please.
relationship between those two size circles, so the maximum internal diameter and the maximum
Whatever.
external diameter, happened to be the square root of 6/2.
This game, man.
Right, that was the
It's not gonna
relationship.
work.
And so from using that, then they took that ratio and looked at the other curvatures and found actually this is the same ratio that we see reflected up and down all of the other curvatures, just to the power of n. So like -1, -2, or 3, or whatever it is, up and down.
Pretty good start.
The different
Pretty good start.
curvatures.
Come on. Let's
The
go.
other thing that's encoded in the base, and these are the other curvatures
Let's
with
go.
significant diameters or significant sort of
Let's go.
features of the base that don't match that
No.
radial traversal pattern. They seem to be there, and they also reflect pretty significant
Fine.
ratios in terms of pi and phi. So pi being 3.14. This is how many times the
Wow.
circle goes into the diameter of the circle goes into its circumference, and then the golden ratio, which is 1.618 or etc. Yep. And that's the golden ratio encoded in nature, the Fibonacci sequence, etc. Like, this is a fundamental of nature. I mean, Randall does a great job explaining this. And it's encoded in everything in nature, from molecules and DNA to the spiral formation of galaxies and everything in between. We see this encoded in these elements in the base. So, for example,
I hate this
if you take
Like this
the D0 here, so basically the straight red line, the diameter of the outer lip of the top of the vase over the radius of the internal opening, RI, the straight blue line, you get pi. And you get pi to within 0.1%, which in real terms and real measurements on the vase is around 32 microns. So 32 microns. So very accurately, so within 0.1%, this ratio of DO to RI is pi. Similarly, we see phi squared when we look at the diameter of the neck, DN. This straight line,
See, like, it was moot because
diameter,
I tried to see if I would survive,
and again to the ratio of
and I would not have.
the internal opening,
I wasn't even close.
we get phi squared, and we get phi squared to
Even at full speed.
7%, so around
So the mess up in the exhaust plate is moot.
significant ratios appear. We also see it when we look at the foot of the vase. So again, if you look at the diameter of the opening, which is that same what we saw in this first one, that straight red line, the diameter of the outer lip. DO is the outer lip, not the inner lip, the outer lip. And we put that over the radius of the foot. We also get pi squared within 0.08% or around 35 micron on the actual vase. And what's interesting about these is that these are ratios and measurements that are on two completely separate ends of the vase, right? So it's remarkably accurate, given that these are features that are as far apart from each other as they can be. So
Oh, brutal.
because we've
That
got
was really
pi
bad.
and phi in both of these, and we've also talked about the diameter of
I got
the
lucky
outer
there.
lip in terms of pi in that first equation, we actually get this double equivalence. We have two ways of expressing the diameter of the outer lip, right? So it's this double equivalence. So we can actually express the radius of the foot in a different measurement in terms of pi, and not just we can do it in terms of pi and in terms of phi. So the radius of the foot now equals the radius of the internal opening times pi over phi squared. This is this double equivalency because we're seeing pi and phi in both of these measurements. And what's interesting in this, and in fact, I don't know if I can do, does this follow on your screen? See this?
Yeah. Yep.
See the, I guess the,
Base unit reveal.
Oh, no way.
base unit revealed. I almost want to see the
It's terrible. So terrible,
one of
dude.
the, I guess the step through of the animations here. So through pi and phi and this double equivalence of the radius of the outer opening, we can connect all four measures. So the diameter of the outer lip, the diameter of the neck, the radius of the internal opening, and the radius of the foot. And it looks complex, but it's actually pretty simple when you step through it. So it's the same measurements we just went through.
What?
Sorry.
A lot of lag in that run. It was a good run though.
So the diameter of the outer lip equals the radius of the internal opening times pi, and the tilde is and. The diameter of the neck, these are the same things we went through before, equals the radius of the internal opening times pi squared, or phi squared, and the radius of the foot, and this is that double equivalency measure we mentioned before, that equals the radius of the internal opening times pi over phi squared. So something that's in all of these you might notice is Ri, so the radius of the internal opening. So we can now say, let's assume
Come on, man.
that the radius of the internal opening equals 1.
Yeah.
Now, if the radius of the internal opening equals 1, we can simplify these equations such that the diameter of the outer lip equals pi, because we're taking out, we just basically replace Ri with 1.
1 times pi.
Yeah, it's 1 times pi. The diameter of the neck equals phi squared, because it's 1 times phi squared. And the radius of the foot equals pi over phi squared. So these ratios appear, so therefore we can assume that the radius of the internal opening equals 1. That's how Mark got to this idea that this might be the base unit of measure for the vase, and that is, as we discussed before, 18.739 millimeters, which also equals the wavelength of an electromagnetic wave at 16 gigahertz to within 2 microns. So it's 18.737 if you divide the speed of light by 16 gigahertz, speed of light to vacuum by 16 gigahertz, you get 18.737 millimeters, which is 2 micron or 2,000ths of a millimeter off that 18.739. Now, if you followed the math, you probably already realized this bit, but it's interesting to then look at the rest of the vase through the lens of that base unit of measure, and these elegant significant ratios start to appear when you do that. Now, obviously, the opening radius of the neck is 1, right? The unit is 1, because that is the ratio, that is the measure we're using. That equals 18.74 millimeters. But we get down to things like this, where it's the max lip diameter or the outer lip diameter. That's pi base units. The minimum neck diameter is phi squared base units. The foot radius is pi over phi squared base units. So that's kind of the logic that he used to get to what might be the base unit of measure for this vase, because these aren't accidental. I don't think this just pops up accidentally.
Right.
That you
Good
have
shit.
these significant ratios relative to one of the main measurements on the vase itself. And what's interesting, since this happened, and this was the result of kind of the initial
Oh my god, man.
this one vase, and this is what's really encouraging to me, is that Mark and there's other researchers also involved in this effort now on the
Why?
mathematics side. The process is now automated. So they've written some computer programs where you can put in the measurements of the vases and it will show you significant ratios. So it will actually compare everything to everything and pump out a list of what are the significant ratios. And it's something that we could actually apply this to any. If you, and I do want to do this experiment at some point. Take a household object. Let's take a regular coffee cup or something, and just see. Like, okay, can we see the same type of significant ratios appearing in regular artifacts? I don't think we will. I don't think it's going to be anything like what we see on these vases. Because people say that. That's one of the arguments against these vases.
Yes.
Oh, you know, you see pi and phi and everything. You can just look at the stars in the sky. Or
I hate this game.
this stuff's just like made up math. And
Right.
I don't think that's true. Like, particularly, I definitely don't think it's true when it comes to the ratios and the curvatures and the radial traversal pattern. But I also don't think it's true when it comes to pi and phi and these significant ratios and these other features. And now that we've got an automated process, if we scan some other artifacts and we get measurements on them, we can actually run it through this process and see. And that's part of the work that's going to be going on right now. And what's really super interesting is that we're only talking about the one vase at this point, but we've seen the same things in other vases. And that's been a huge step forward for this whole project, is that not only are we seeing the radial traversal pattern, the exact same ratio between curvatures in multiple vases that have been scanned and analysed. We're also seeing these significant pi and phi ratios in the main features of these vases.
Right.
It's the same thing. Like it's just not accidental. Like it's
Right.
insane.
Like you said in your video, it's like it's not a unicorn, right?
It's not a unicorn, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%.
I have heard this same thing. I mean, this same
Right.
argument from, I don't know if you could even say skeptics, just people who it's like they don't want to accept that this is an important thing that happens. Like when you study some ancient object, you're like, wait a minute, look at all these very interesting mathematical ratios. Whether you're looking at it in the Great Pyramid itself, because people have found tons of them in that. You know, like wow, pi and phi are represented in a million different ways in all the structures inside the pyramid, and all the, you know, people are like, well, you know, you can find those same relationships in a kitchen stool if it's well made, you know. And I'm like, we'll do it. Get a freaking stool and show me, like, oh yeah, look here's pi and phi, and like here's pi over, you know, phi squared.
Yeah, I want to see the same thing. I mean, I'm in the same boat.
Yeah.
People say that. And,
Yeah.
and,
Well, okay,
and you can
here's the
find
problem.
fine. You can find fine things, but I challenge you to find 12 or 13 degrees of mathematical interrelationships.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, but
It's the way that they're all connected. Yes.
No one's gonna even try this on like a natural cedar wood stool because they're definitely not precise. Like most like artistic objects are not precision. They don't have like bilateral symmetry. They don't.
Oh, that would have been so
It's not
clutch.
difficult to find where it's.
Oh.
Most pieces of art actually kind of. It's almost they're intentionally a little bit.
But you'll see
organic.
fine. You will see the golden
I know,
ratio.
but my point is that you're not looking for accuracy in mathematical representations in most handmade works of art because there's no reason to do that. Like people, okay, so people have done this with like, you know, Da Vinci's paintings and stuff like that, where they're like, look at these angles, you know, and but it's so roughly done. It's like the position of the guy, he's down here and his arm is going up, and then if you kind of look at it, there's a lamp up there, and it's just like kind of like, well, he's sort of everything is positioned in the room in this beautiful sort of phi ratio spiral.
Yeah.
And that's fine, but it's not accurate.
Right.
It is very arbitrary. When you're talking about the radius of a circle down to the micron level, you wouldn't even try to do that on a normal handmade piece of art.
Yeah.
That's the key here. It doesn't even compare.
Oh, I suck.
You can get measurements.
Like, I really suck.
Right.
And then find pi to a high degree of accuracy, which you're not going to find.
Oh, wow.
in painting.
It's terrible.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
I'd like to
terrible.
know, like, is the rough radius of the top of a stool,
Wow.
you know, in some pi over phi ratio to the radius of one of the legs?
Yeah, that would be fun.
I would love to know this.
Well, we can
Yeah.
scan and find out. We now have applications written where if we can scan the artifact or scan anything, we can put in the significant measurements of that object. It'll
Yeah.
figure it out for us. Like it'll do
Nice.
it. So, you know, it's usually
I've
you
got
talk
some
about
good-
the pyramids. I want to make a point about
Exiled.
the vases. Sorry. I'm
I feel like I'm exiled from a completion in this level.
I got this beer can. We can measure this, and we can measure the lip, and we can see.
Yeah, beer can would be a good measurement. Yeah.
Did
Yeah.
Lone Star put mathematical
Did
measurements?
Lone Star on something, bro? Drinking the correct beer for Texas. I was going to say that pyramids and the vases, yeah, so it was a recent discovery for me, like a connection, please. So I was at CPAC, speaking at the CPAC conference, and Robert Grant was speaking at the CPAC conference too. And Robert has done some new work in terms of analysing, and I'm going to hand fist this, but I want to make the connection because this blew me away, and this again came from the audience, like it came from
This
the
is a
commentator.
This is a precision conversation.
It is.
Can't just
Yeah.
hand fist this.
I will hand fist it. And I will reserve my right to correct what I say later about that. But, so he has done a bunch of new research looking at the specific slope angles of all of the different pyramids, and indeed things like the ratio of sort of length to width of the Giza plateau, and he's mapped all of those things and found that they correspond to the harmonic scale, like the F sharp, like the harmonic scale in terms of ratios and measurements, and that the different pyramids represent these things on the harmonic scale. And what's interesting is that once we posted the radial traversal pattern, I had a commenter talk about the fact that the square root of 6/2 to the power of 3, 4, 5, whatever, also matches this exact same kind of harmonic scale. So I think it's an interesting perspective. I want to test it, and we're looking into it to see if that holds water. But what's interesting to me is it is a potential connection between the mathematics of design.
Yeah.
So the mathematical design between things like the pyramids and the vases could be connected through these elements, and it was an interesting connection. And I had yet to speak to. It was really bizarre because I spoke to Robert about it. I mean, I met him, I didn't know who he was. We were up looking at a telescope at the hotel in Palm Springs, and I was like, "Oh, I'm speaking." I've never seen it. I never heard of it. I don't watch TV. I don't watch Gaia.
Sorry, Tom.
Watch a lot of other stuff.
Sorry, man.
But I didn't know who it was, but we were talking, I was telling him what I was doing, and he told me what he was doing, and then I watched the presentation. I'm like, man, there's a lot of synchronicity here between these ratios and what we're talking about. And then afterwards, after I talked to him, I posted that video when I was in Egypt, and somebody put me onto this fact about the radial traversal pattern matching the acoustic scale, and I was like, shit, that's very interesting relative to this work. So it's an angle that I want to try and pursue and figure out, but it's just interesting.
Yeah, and it's like this. Whenever I hear this kind of stuff, it strikes me that we have these words or these sayings that, living in harmony, right? It's this idea of like being in harmony, or the as above, so below. And I think of this, and I'm like, is there something there, right? This is like, I don't know why the word is being used, but does this idea come from some very ancient concept? Or even a sort of like a quant sub of this concept. There's this harmony, and these objects are made in it, all the way up to the pyramids themselves and the angles of the map. There's a kind of harmonic happening. What is it harmonizing with?
Well, nature. I don't know. It's like it's the universe. This whole. I mean, the fact that I don't think it's accidental that you have these universal constants encoded in these artifacts. I don't think it can be. I think it's a communication. It's like it's telling you they understood these things, and that's a deep understanding of the nature of reality in the universe.
Yeah.
It blows me away that people think it could be just accidental. I don't think it is. I think it's pretty clear indication of sophistication and knowledge, and harmony with nature. I mean, they literally have a more harmonious method. I look at it and I think there's a more harmonious sort of mathematical system at play here, one that is more tightly entrenched with these principles than our own system. Like, it's not, these are like more fundamental base units for them, like these particular ratios and these constants. They were using them and they built the system around them. Versus, we measure them and we express them in our units of measurement. But I think they were, a little bit more tightly coupled to it. That's what it seems to me. And it's just like a fundamental piece of everything.
So if the radius of this object, the radius of the outer lip top here is 1.
The internal opening, radius of the internal opening.
Oh, is it the internal? Yeah. Okay, I thought it was the internal. Okay, you're right. So it's the internal radius. That's r equals 1.
Yeah.
For this object. And then if you apply that same concept to the other bases? Are you getting similar, like simplifications? No.
Well, not
not
that
the
measure.
length, but the not the length, but the same principle.
I don't know.
Okay.
We don't know yet. I haven't done them. I don't think we've done the analysis yet to see if that same thing holds true for other features. It's one of the many things that are on the list of things. It may have been done already. I haven't talked with the guys doing that stuff in a couple of weeks now.
Yeah.
I can tell you for sure that the radius of the base of that pointed is not going to match.
True. Yeah, the radius of the foot of that 21 is not going to match. I agree.
Right. Well, I guess the question I'm really asking is, is there some base length in the other bases that will be that you could say, this is the one for this base.
I have the same.
Yeah.
That's what I was thinking.
I mean, and then the next question is if we can define a bunch of those where you're like, okay, here's this base, here's this one, we found the one for each one of these.
Then you
Compare them, and then can we find out maybe what their unit of measure is?
Yeah. So there's the two ones that we've looked at and have been as astonishing as that main one, if not even more. There's two of them. There's this one, the very thin, very thin lipped. This is like the side walls are between 2 and 4 millimeters. In fact, I can feel the groove that's around the inside of this, but this is a translucent one. So it shows the radial traversal pattern, it shows the 1 radian angle, it shows a bunch of different features. Just like the other one. And in fact, there's been some geometric reports done on these. I haven't done videos on them specifically yet, but I did include a little bit about them in the video from Danville, where we actually had the original versions of these in the measuring room and put them on rotabs, and we had bases on them, dial indicators on them.
Yeah.
And then the other one was this one, the spinner.
The spinner.
The spinner's amazing. I'm hard pressed to think of favourite between these actually. I like the thin one just because it's so delicate and it's amazing that it survived this long. This one's a bit more solid. It has more heft to it. But it spins incredibly well. If you've seen the video, it just spins and spins and spins. And what's so interesting about this is that you want to talk about the same sort of relationships that we see in the other base. Okay, this thing is full of the radial traversal pattern, as is this one. But what's interesting about this is the geometry of why it spins. So it's actually it's like
Oh yeah, I remember this.
yeah. So it's like it's like this fat little squat looking thing. But it turns out that the base and the way this is defined, the width of it, it's actually 3 circles of the exact same radius, the same size, slightly offset from each other. So you have one that sticks out on this side, one that sticks out on this side, one that sticks out just a tiny bit on the bottom. In fact, it only sticks out like just less than a millimeter. And it's that the tip that it forms with that geometric shape that is what lets it spin. So it's this tiny, less than a millimeter tip of these circles that sticks out, and that's what it sits on and spins perfectly on the bottom. And it turns out that these circles also have a relationship to the height of the base it's exactly, I think it's phi, or it's phi squared. But it has the exact same, so these significant measurements of the base are encoded in this thing too. Like it's not an accident. And this thing's so precisely made that you literally sit there and spin it. Like the granite version, it's quite heavy, it just spins and spins.
Yeah, in the video they put it down on the table and he spins it, and he's watching it, it just spins. Keeps going. It slows down very
It's on a granite table, yeah. It's like a granite base on a granite table. And even this thing will spin, like even this plastic one is it's made pretty well. I mean, nothing like to the accuracy of the scanning or anything, but you can spin this, even the plastic ones will spin. In fact, I've got a back channel with Nick and Alex, and they've got a bunch of these, and they're spinning them and knocking them into each other and stuff. The plastic, the 3D version.
Plastic ones?
Yeah, the plastic.
It's astonishing to me about that one that it sits so perfectly upright.
Oh yeah.
It's not like
It's not overbalanced
it's
on
not
the
rolling
sides.
over to the
Yeah,
side
I
of one
mean-
of the lug handles or something. It's just.
You guys see the picture I took of it?
It's an achievement.
Like I have to show it to you. Yeah. Well, the people that are actually going to watch this, I'm gonna show you something.
Yeah. Makes me want to get a potter's wheel. Like I just want to get a potter's wheel and start making some pots.
I mean, this guy,
out
this
of
is it
clay
here,
and
right?
see-
Yeah.
And just there you go. Like that's
Yeah.
it's just insane. Like yeah, like that's what it's sitting on, and it's just perfectly balanced on that, and that's on a granite surface plate, a surface table that's like 0.4 of a thousandth.
Yeah, it's like an A
4/10
rating.
of a thousandth. It's flat. So
Yeah.
it's not being held on anything. It's
And
just
the fact that it's just like, look at the top. Look at how level the top is. It's just beautifully. I mean,
yeah. I mean, there's any number of things to talk about with these bloody vases. I mean, the fact that the tops are flat. And you can use them as a reference surface. You can mount them on a rotab based on the flat top. Like with this one, we just spun it around, sat it on its top. Because you can measure that the top's so flat that it doesn't give you like this run out. If it wasn't flat, you wouldn't be able to measure it would deviate when it rotates. It would wobble.
Yeah.
But the tops and the bottoms of these things are so flat that it doesn't affect it. It's like they're within a thou or so of being perfectly flat, these surfaces. So you can literally use the top and the bottom as a datum, like as a reference point, and then you just mount them based on that, and you're good. It's within the tolerance of kind of the rest of the gear. Like the rotab itself has a run out of about a thou. So
I saw that. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's got a little tiny deviation.
yeah, it's crazy. So yeah, actually, and that's what I liked about that day. I was really happy when I went out there. I'd like to think it's a realistic sort of nuts and bolts version of precision. Like it's not this esoteric, like we're doing this computer simulation analysis of a 3D model in software on on a mainframe or whatever it is.
You're
It's like
mounting them in actual tools and like putting dials on them, spinning them and like watching the dial. Yeah, exactly. It's cool.
you still get people that go like, oh, it's not precise. Look at that dial, it's jumping all over the place. Like it's
it's jumping
those are in
0.5.
thousandths or half of a thousandth of an inch, so it's okay, bro. Yeah. You stick your hair in there, it's going to jump quite a way.
Right.
It isn't precise in there, it's just going to like go burp and stop.
And that's the other thing is like these are 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10,000 years old. Like
Yeah.
how precise were they when they came off of the manufacturing floor?
Right. Yeah, and a lot of them have visual damage and visible damage, and there was a couple that we couldn't actually measure because of damage. We don't know how old they are. Like they could be that old, they could be way older. It's a miracle. Yeah, and
That's what I'm saying is that the precision remains. But what we're measuring is very ancient precision, so you don't even know how much precision has been lost because it doesn't take that even on a granite object. It doesn't take a whole lot of rubbing against sand to lose a half of a thousandth of an inch on one part of it.
again, not all of these things are precise.
That's right.
Remember that giant? I mean, that massive chunker down underneath the step pyramid.
Yeah,
where
yeah.
they, like rolled it over. It's part of the lip of the vase, and then this big round piece of the side. I mean, that thing is it's a monster. It's probably 2 inches thick or more. Heavy, big chunk of what was a massive. I mean, how did you turn that thing? I don't think that one, if it was whole, would show the precision.
probably not. I don't know.
These others. It might, but I'm just saying it's like
Damaged either way.
it's heavily damaged. But
I do make that point. Not everything is that precise. That's right, and that's not what we said. In fact, we measured a couple that were in order. We have a couple of different bases. This one. So this one is like no lug handles, but granite. I think it was granite, basalt. An order of magnitude worse. So where something's like 2 or 3 thousandths, you're talking 20 or 30 or 40 thousandths out on this.
sometimes your bearings are getting.
Well, I don't know.
Bearings are wallowed out a bit.
I don't know. I think I think there's, and it's something that I've been paying much more close attention to in the last couple of years in museums and stuff. And I have a lot of pictures. Even the last trip to Egypt, I take a lot of attention at what is obviously handmade, because there are handmade hard stone artifacts. There are handmade vases and stuff, and you can see. You can obviously see the ones that are really rough. But they probably also put some effort into a few that you could just look at and go, I can't really tell, and you probably wouldn't be able to tell until you measured it. But yeah, there's some handmade stuff that's probably reasonably good, but I don't think it's within anywhere close to the precision of the actual precise objects, of which I think there are many, by the way. made, lots of the stuff in the museums. And also a lot of the vases that we measured that are in the collections that we have access to right now are very precise. That I don't think you can explain it, most of them with anything other than machining.
Yeah.
But the point is too is that look, our modern tools today, we have very high precision lathes. We have low precision lathes.
Yeah.
We have bearings that are not as good. The tools are not as rigid. And then the other factor is when your cutting tools get dull, you lose precision. You know, so I mean, there's a lot of different factors that go into getting the precision. Even if you have the capability and the technology, you're not always going to get it.
Right. No, I agree. And we know they made mistakes too. So
You make
Yeah.
mistakes.
We see that all
bearings
over the
go
place.
out. You get a deviation in some aspect of the machine. You're not going to get the precision. So,
yeah.
I wouldn't expect them all to be the same.
No.
But it's like Dunn says, it's like we have to explain the
hard,
most
yeah.
difficult aspects.
That's right. We do have to explain the most difficult aspect, and the fact that we found so many of what I would term the exceptional class of artifacts within a collection of maybe 20 that we've looked at so far. It's remarkable.
That means that you can't explain the exceptional stuff by saying it was an accident.
Or a unicorn, right? Yeah.
Right,
Or it's
yeah.
a fake. The
Right.
other ones had better problems. We dealt with the problems, but yeah, I mean, I agree. There's a spectrum of them, 100%. And we know that there was definitely mistakes were made. I mean, we have the unfinished box in the museum. We have overcuts on all sorts of stuff, on obelisks and statues. We have overcuts on the box in the King's Chamber. We were looking at in the break. We were looking at some of the Serapeum boxes that have not necessarily mistakes. It's like were they mistakes or were they working with the stone and they were dealing with imperfections in the natural material that they're working with is another part of this. But yeah, it's not perfect. But it's still way beyond. My point is that and everyone's. I think our point is it's beyond. It's beyond dudes banging on them with rocks and sticks and sand.
Yes, it's definitely past that at this point.
That's the point. Like if we can admit that, then I'm like, all right.
Yeah.
Next.
We've moved. Yes. Next mystery. I still get the idea that they were kind of in a hurry. I mean, it's sort of like
haunting thought.
yes, because there's like overcuts and like you just get the idea like they're like we've got to get this done, and then they make these mistakes where the saw gets off and they're like okay just throw it to the side. It isn't like they got rid of it, right? It was found. So it's like they make mistakes, you just toss it to the side and keep cutting because you're trying to finish this job before you run out of time. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, one thing we're not precise on is taking our breaks. Yeah, we have a low precision on this, but it is break time.
And we're back, ladies and gentlemen, for the final segment of the fastest face talk in the history of podcasting.
I love
An hour and 45 minutes of faces.
Yes.
Not enough. Still haven't figured it out.
Yeah. I freaking love this stuff. It's great feeling like, we're pushing forward here.
Yeah.
I agree.
It should change the conversation. is there, you kind of, I think you kind of hinted that this is my final question on this topic. You kind of hinted at this, I think, in your latest video. But is there a possibility of getting actual museum pieces to do some of these scans on?
Yes.
Is that being worked on?
Yes. Answer is yes. We are on a couple of different fronts, actually. So Chris Dunn has a concept that I'm a big fan of, and that is that he thinks that, and he's been saying this. Certainly, it's a part of his new book, which is coming out. I can highly recommend it. I've read it. Gyges, the Tesla Connection, comes out in January, February. One of the things that he talks about is that it's time for the Egyptians themselves and the engineers in Egypt to kind of take control of some of their heritage, and I think because in a lot of ways their own like the history of Egypt, and this picture we have of what is ancient Egypt is one that to some extent has been dictated to them by external groups, the British, the Americans, the Germans, the French.
Yep.
The Egyptologists as they've stood, and then Egypt has a chance here to really redefine their own history and take control of it. And I'm happy to say that there's been some progress made on that front, because it's Egyptian engineers who have already been involved with Egypt, with museums in Egypt. And they've done some things in the past, like just scanning artifacts with LiDAR for 3D tours, where you can look at here's a 3D scan of an artifact and spin it round in a virtual tour or whatever. And it's not particularly accurate. It's like LiDAR scanning that you get on an iPhone or a handheld LiDAR device. It's not super accurate like a structural light scanner, but they're doing that process already. They've put these objects on tables and they're lighting it and they're spinning it. They're creating models on it. So we've been having some conversations with a few of the universities and the people that are involved in those efforts already and have relationships with the museums, and they're engineers, and they're very interested in the results that are coming out of the project so far. So we're trying to leverage that, and they are making inroads to work with these museums to say, well, let's go back in with structured light scanners. Let's get actual scans. Let's get these, thousands of an inch or even better resolution scans, and then we can put them out and analyze them and figure out some more things. So that's happening. It's a slow process, but it is happening. And I do think we need to get, as part of this, we want to get Egyptologists on board. I think Egyptologists should be interested in this. At the end of the day, it's we are going to learn more about the manufacture of these artifacts. At the end of the day, you are doing also digital preservation of these artifacts. Yeah. This is a big selling point. And I know this is also a push with some of the museums. It's like we're literally digitally preserving these artifacts forever, as long as there's a digital record. I mean, if God forbid something happens to one of these things, you have a digital record of it that is very, very accurate. So you have a record. So that's I think that's a benefit, if nothing else, just the fact that you get this digital preservation of these artifacts. That's a benefit. And then, I've been trying to, and as I said before, I had some conversations with the British Museum, and I also work with the Petrie Museum to try and get in there. It's just a matter of time, I think, until we can get in there. I know the Petrie Museum does allow this type of work. They're a research museum. They've certainly seemed willing in my engagement with them so far. I was there earlier this year, really strangely, and I mean, I think honestly just a coincidence, but they happened to be closed for renovation for exactly the 2 or 3 weeks that I was in, the period that I was in the UK. Unbelievable. I actually have pictures of standing out in front of the Petrie Museum. I emailed them back and forth about trying to get in outside of that, and I had some friends who knew them as well. They just couldn't do it. But I'm definitely going to go back and book research appointments, and they've certainly seemed willing to work with us and they've got a lot of artifacts, not only vases and plates and stuff that Petrie's worked on, but also the drill cores. I want to scan, and I know Alex Dunn's really interested in scanning the drill core. Petrie's core number 7 is the main one that everyone's looked at, but if you go through their archives and you look at their collection, they've got a whole bunch of drill cores. And a lot of them, just at least from the photographs, look like they have the same type of deep spiral grooves that Petrie's core number 7 does. I would love to scan those, because I think we can get, think that mystery's been solved as far as Beatrice core number 7 goes. That was solved with the latex core or the latex mold and the other work that's done there. But I think there's certainly more cores we could look at, and I think analyze using these techniques. But long story short, long story long, it's yes, we're working with museums, and I very much hope that if we get into a couple of museums and we can do this work, that will open the door for the bigger museums, the Met, the big museums in the US, maybe one day the Cairo Museum. I don't know, like that. I would love. That's like the ultimate dream. Is
The ultimate goal,
what's in the Cairo Museum? Because goddamn, they've got a lot of interesting stuff in there.
Right, and this is the other thing. If the new Grand Museum would ever open, like supposedly they're going to have a whole bunch of artifacts that haven't seen the light of day. They've been in a basement for 100 years, and that may open up entirely new lines of inquiry on some of this stuff. Who knows?
I can't wait to get in there, man. I'm hoping they're in there when we're in there. We're there in February and
I know.
and in March. But February and March we're going to be. Welcome back to Uncharted X. This is Ben, and I hope you're all well. We're going to be doing something a little different today. This isn't one of my normal scripted videos. Instead, it's a version of the presentation that I gave recently at the Cosmic Summit conference. It's about the evidence for ancient high technology, something I've been calling a tale of two industries. I really wanted to put this out on my channel as a thank you to all of the viewers and subscribers and supporters of the work that I've been doing over the last few years. I really wouldn't have even been able to give this presentation at the Cosmic Summit if it weren't for all you guys. And I wanted to make sure it was available for everybody to see and not just stuck behind a paywall. This isn't scripted. I wanted to take my time and go through this material thoroughly. It's quite a bit longer than the version that I gave at the Cosmic Summit in only about an hour and a half. So I really hope you enjoy it. Just a quick note before I get started here that I will be joining Randall Carlson on a Mega Floods of the Ice Age tour in Montana in September of 2023, and if you're interested in joining us on that trip, check out the links below in the description. I hope you enjoy the presentation. Cheers. Essentially, this is the topic we're covering today is something I'm calling a tale of two industries. It's the evidence for ancient technology, primarily focused in Egypt, although for sure this is something we could extend to South America and many other places around the world. First of all, who am I? Most of you should know. My name is Ben.
What's up, Toad? Thanks for being here, man.
I'm
Man,
an
dude.
Australian by origin. I'm an expatriate. I've been living in the USA for nearly 18
What up, bro?
years now. Prior to embarking on this strange career,
Thanks, man.
as
That was like 45 minutes.
independent researcher, I had a 20-year career in the network world as essentially a network architect, a technologist. I spent the last sort of almost decade of that working in the chief technology CTO office, the Chief Technology Office for Hewlett-Packard. And this has really shaped a lot of my perspectives around technology. I did a lot of technology planning, long-term technology strategy, R&D investment, mergers, acquisitions. I was essentially an individual contributor creating technological architectures. I've got a couple of patents, things like that. It was a fun career, but this career and this topic, this area is of much more interest to me. I've always been a fan of history. I've been a student of it for a long time. I nearly went that direction when I was in university, but obviously decided there was more money to be made in the IT side of things. So I went that way, but I never lost my interest in it. My mother was a history teacher, and I really got started on this when I had the chance to meet Graham Hancock. His work, Fingerprints of the Gods, was a big influence on me. And then in 2013, I had the chance to meet and travel with him through Peru and Bolivia. And then again in 2015, I was in Egypt for the first time for me, and that was on a tour also with Graham Hancock. That was also the source of the famous debate, if you've ever seen it, between Graham Hancock and Zahi Hawass. There's some clips of that on the internet. And after that, I was like, man, damn, there's a lot here to explore. There's a lot here to try and share with people. And that's pretty much shortly after that is when I started going full-time and pursuing these mysteries and investigating these things full-time. All of my work's published on YouTube, also on unchartedx.com.
Oh, wow.
I'm also on several other platforms now.
Insane.
On Spotify, I'm on Rumble, and you can find my work all over the place. But essentially, my website is where everything is published.
Awesome, man. Hell yeah,
So
bro.
the best place to start with
Money
this, I think,
trader,
is
buddy.
grounded
Nice,
in
man.
what is the orthodox story of history? So what is our perspective on
I'm
human
happy for you,
civilization,
dude.
on
I'm happy for you.
evolution
I'm
of
so
our
happy for
species,
you.
and how did we
You
get to
deserve
where
it
we
all,
are
man.
today? And I'd like to start this with kind of I guess you would call it the standard model view as it was, nearly 20 years ago now, roughly. In 2006, this was a New Scientist article that was published in 2006 and talking about the timeline of human evolution. And this pretty much represented the view of civilization, the history of humans and civilization. And it really has not changed very much since then. But this was pretty much how we've been looking at it for a long time now. It starts around 195,000 years ago, which is when our own species, Homo sapiens, first seemed to appear on the scene. After that, we began to migrate across Asia and Europe. This was determined by carbon-14 dating of, at the time, the oldest modern human remains, which were skulls found in Ethiopia. And roughly, call it 200,000 years ago is when they think our species first appeared on the scene. 50,000 years ago was the great leap forward, almost the beginnings of culture and religion, when we started to ceremonially bury our dead, do things like create, clothes from animal hides, develop complex hunting techniques, things like that. It also corresponds with the date that they think was the first colonization of Australia by modern humans. 12,000 years ago is when it is thought that humans first reached the Americas. This is also often considered or talked about as the Clovis people, or the Clovis boundary. It has long been held as a fairly strong doctrine in archaeology that there were no humans in the Americas prior to this date of 12,000 years ago. And then around 10,000 years ago, we start to see the beginnings of agriculture. This spreads from the verdant Crescent Valley and the top of Mesopotamia, and we start to see the development of, with agriculture, you get villages, you get specialization, you get the progression of human culture that eventually leads towards civilization. There have been several advances in the dating of agriculture since then. Roughly after this period, 4,000 to 3,500 BC, or if we go with the same terminology, the rest of it, 6,000 to 5,500 years ago, the Sumerians of Mesopotamia developed what is thought to be the world's first civilization. So really only a brief period of time from where we stand today. The Sumerians begin it, and of course they are closely followed by people like the Egyptians, the Greeks, the Roman, the Chinese, and civilization spreads across the world, essentially putting us on a path to where we stand today. And this is the standard model of history, and really this hasn't changed very much since this article was published in 2006, particularly dates like the beginnings of civilization. If you think about it,
I'm glad you're here too, bro.
In the overall timeline of humans, it really isn't a very long time, and you can pretty much phrase it like this, as if we've gone from the Stone Age to the Space Shuttle in only 6,000 years. Gone from riding on caves to some very advanced technology, spreading out into space in a really short period of time when you look at the overall timeline of the human species. An interesting part of this is that I do think that this idea that we've gone from essentially cavemen in the Stone Age to our modern society is a tenet of what it means to be a modern human in today's world. This is it's a concept that's baked into all of us. It's not, not everybody knows every, the process or the path that this took in detail, but it's certainly something that we're told. Like, this is inbuilt into us with our education system. We're told that, our civilization has emerged from this Stone Age. It's, obviously there's been ancient civilization, there's been ups and downs, but essentially it's been this more or less linear path to civilization, and that civilization as we know it, this is the way to do it. We're the only, advanced civilization, and this has only happened in the most recent millennia of human existence on this planet. It really forms a core tenet in what it means to be a modern human today. And I think it's a really important concept. We're going to come back to this at the end of the presentation and maybe examine what it might be like if we could change this concept. So what's happened since 2006 and since we've had this standard model of history? Well, there's been a lot of a lot of vectors that are really pressuring and forcing, or at least should be forcing, some change on what you might call that standard model of history that we've just been through. And these vectors are coming from multiple different directions. We're going to briefly cover some of these and then focus on mainly on the evidence for ancient technology, which is one of these vectors, but that's certainly not the only one. We see changes and new discoveries happening in archaeology that should be having a massive effect on the standard model of history, and certainly that of human civilization. There's been a lot of advances in science and discoveries that relate to the human timeline itself. There's DNA evidence that folds into that. Obviously, we have our origin stories, which is a whole component of this, and a lot of the modern science that's happened in the last 20 years is really showing that there are grains of truth in the origin stories that we see from cultures all around the world. And then, of course, a really big one, I think the key that unlocks all of this information, that unlocks all of these possibilities, is cataclysm. We've discovered the actual truth of real cataclysm that's occurred in the recent past, particularly with the work of the Comet Research Group and discovering the effects and the impacts and the airbursts of the period known as the Younger Dryas period, which we'll talk about briefly. Starting off with archaeology, there's obviously one of the very big discoveries that most people should be aware of is that there's been a tremendous amount of discoveries happening in Turkey. And this started with the site known as Göbekli Tepe, which is located in southeastern Turkey, near the modern city of Şanlıurfa, which was the biblical Edessa, the city of prophets, also known as Urfa at some point. It's part of the, it's the northern end of what was Mesopotamia. That city's been there for thousands and thousands of years.
Like, so fucking dumb.
It's a holy city for many
so
religions.
dumb.
It deals with a lot of the characters from the Old Testament. And close to this site, it was originally discovered in the 1950s, this site of Göbekli Tepe. Funnily enough, in the 50s, this site was dismissed as being they didn't think it was very ancient because the architecture was too good, so it wasn't really investigated. And it wasn't until work started in the late 1990s by the German Archaeological Institute that they started to uncover this site and dig down and found out that no, in fact, this site is tremendously ancient, and in fact it's much more ancient than we had thought, and it's certainly much more ancient than any dates for civilization. It's been firmly carbon-14 dated to at least 12,000 years old, so we're talking 10,000 BC for this site. It's a massive megalithic site. If you've not seen it, I got the chance to visit it myself earlier this year in 2023. They've only uncovered some 5, maybe 10% of the site. There's huge amounts yet to be uncovered. I'm not sure if they're ever going to, but they've been scanning it and they know the site extends a lot further than what is currently uncovered. It consists of a number of stone circles. Some of these stone circles, recent studies have shown that the circles themselves are arranged in very interesting geometric patterns. Some of them form equilateral triangles. Many of these circles also have alignment properties in terms of aligning to significant celestial events, things like solstices and equinoxes. The stone circles themselves are really interesting in their construction because many of them consist of these very large single-piece T-pillars. These are made from a hard form of limestone. Some of them are just massive. They range up in size from 15 tons, 20 tons. Some of them are even up to 18 feet tall. There's a couple of really good reconstructions of these pillars in the Şanlıurfa Museum in the city of Şanlıurfa. And it's not just stone circles that we found at this site. It's buildings, quarries, we have stone-cut cisterns. There is signs of occupation and what you might term civilization here. As I said, a lot of these circles and their properties are astronomically aligned. The work of Martin Sweatman has suggested that the figures that are carved into the stone pillars might represent a celestial calendar. And there was a thought at some point that this was deliberately buried, although the science and the research on this is starting to shift that opinion. What I'd say is most interesting about Göbekli Tepe is when you look at the way it's been buried or it's been covered in, you can clearly see two forms of construction here. Right? There is a sophisticated form of stonework in the monoliths themselves and in their carvings, and then there is a much more primitive version that really makes up the walls that encompass these stone circles. And the interesting thing to me is that the carbon-14 dates and the way that they've actually dated this site comes from material that they found in the walls. It's not specifically other material or anything on the ground. They found organic material in these walls, and those walls we know were built in that 12,000 year ago period. What's interesting to me is that in a lot of cases these walls encompass the pillars, like they actually cover up previously made details on the pillars. And in some places here, you can actually see chunks of broken pillars that have been used as stones in the walls themselves. And this is certainly suggestive of a much later period and a more primitive period of building. Maybe it was used to restore and renovate the site, to repair it, to protect it. We don't really know, but I think there's very likely a much longer story to this site, and one that encompasses a couple of different periods of building and of occupation. Göbekli Tepe itself, this was thought to have been just a revolution in terms of ancient history. It was kind of a bombshell at the time that it dropped on us. And it wasn't received that way within the sort of the mainstream archaeological community, although there are a few dissenting perspectives on this. I, particularly after looking at the site and investigating it, and also I think this opinion
So
shared
quindi
by
how are you, man?
Hancock, this is to me a pretty clear indication of civilization. Like, you need specialization in order to develop stonework of this magnitude and the size and scope of the site. You need people to be able to specialize in their crafts in terms of feeding. You need community, you need society, you need civilization in order to build something like this and build it on this scale. But rather than actually changing that 6,000-year-old date of civilization, instead, and if you can still see this on the Wikipedia page for Göbekli Tepe, instead they just changed the definition of what it meant to be a hunter-gatherer. Because in the past, doing megalithic stonework in blocks up to 20 tons was not included as an activity that they thought that hunter-gatherer tribes and nomadic people did. But now apparently this is purely a ceremonial site for hunter-gatherers. I think this is complete nonsense.
I hate
But
this
that's
game.
how it's been treated, and that date of civilization remains firmly
What's up, what's up?
around 6,000 years old. On its own, I think Göbekli Tepe is significant evidence for a much older date for civilization, potentially vastly older when you consider the different phases of occupation here. But what's happened in recent years, and I'm talking the last 5 or 6 years, I think should really be challenging this perspective on civilization, because it turns out Göbekli Tepe is not even close to being the only site that's now been discovered in this part of Turkey. Another site was uncovered and found nearby. It's very close to Göbekli Tepe. It's older than Göbekli Tepe. The dating that has come back from this site, it establishes it at least 500 years older than Göbekli Tepe. It's known as Karahan Tepe. It shares an architecture with Göbekli Tepe. There is a lot of these pits that are dug down to bedrock. You see shapes that are formed out of the bedrock. This is actually a much bigger site than Göbekli Tepe. It's 5 times larger as far as we know. It's only the excavations here have only just begun in recent years. So far we've discovered at least 250 T-pillars on the site. There might be up to 1,000 T-pillars on this site. And I also visited this site in early 2023, and there's actually a T-pillar that's still in a quarry. Like, it was never detached from the bedrock. But
Well,
this
Toad,
T-pillar must have weighed probably about
Are you
30
selling?
It's
Or
a
are you
huge
holding?
piece. And in fact, on this image you can see here, those piles of rocks in the center of this enclosure, they're actually T-pillars that have
Holding.
fallen down and then they have eroded. They've fallen apart, and I don't know
Cool,
how much
man.
time it would have taken for this to happen before the site was eventually covered and buried in sediment. But
Congrats,
we
my
don't
man.
really know how actually old this site is. And what's even more impressive now is that these aren't the only
Wow.
sites that they found in southeastern Turkey.
Insane.
There's many other sites now coming to light that institutions and archaeologists have started looking for them. In fact, 40 to 80 more sites just like these are now coming to light. It starts to become pretty ridiculous to suggest that, well, no, these are just ceremonial.
You peaked at what,
hunter-gatherer sites that,
65?
these guys were working on the weekends in order to get away from
60
the women and
grand?
children. When you start talking about 40 to 80 of these types of installations all over the place, and some of them are truly massive in scale.
69? It
It's
did
clearly
not.
indicative that
Are you
there's
serious?
a
It literally
huge
peaked
chapter
at
of human
69?
civilization that's been lost
That's
to us that we know
hilarious.
nothing about. And I can only equate it and
That's
compare
really
it
funny.
to the similar set of discoveries
It's not funny that it peaked, but
in the Amazon basin, thanks to deforestation.
just the number.
And
Just too
overhead
much.
LiDAR scannings, we're seeing the same sort of thing emerging from the Amazon. The evidence for tremendous cities.
Wow, that went high, man.
Huge
69.
earthwork, installations. Just whole chapters and completely lost episodes of human civilization that happened at we don't know when, but certainly a long time ago. And I think these sites in southeastern Turkey should really be shaking up what we think of as the earliest dates for human civilization.
Yeah, it might go up to 60 again.
Not only that,
Honestly.
but the Clovis doctrine in North America, in the North
Wow.
American states and
Insane.
South America, has been severely challenged over the last 20 years. The Clovis doctrine, if you like, this date of 12,000 years was the earliest time that we saw humans in the Americas. There's now, more than half a dozen sites that have really challenged this, that are using techniques like carbon-14 dating. In particular, the Bluefish Cave site, which is in the Yukon, it shows that there were humans working on this site and doing things at this site 10,000 years earlier than that, so roughly 25,000 years ago. There's a whole bunch of different sites that are suggestive of this. Unfortunately, there was a very strong doctrine associated with this Clovis first concept in the Americas and in the Archaeological Institute. In fact, Gyges, who was the discoverer of Bluefish Cave, was actually run out essentially of the academic environment. He just basically laughed out of the room every time he suggested this by his colleagues, and it caused him, he was depressed by it. It caused him a lot of personal problems. It's really unfortunate to see the resistance that was put forth to what is in fact really strong new evidence that humans have been in this part of the world for a lot longer than were originally established. But as of this point, there are more and more sites coming up that are showing no. In fact, there is evidence for human occupation in the Americas long before the 12,000-year-old Clovis doctrine. The timeline of human evolution itself is changing. We were at around 200,000 years old with the skulls found in Ethiopia. There was now a jawbone that's been found in Morocco that was carbon dated to 300,000 years ago, so instantly adding another 100,000 years to the timeline of the human species itself. This is essentially, walking, talking humans. If you shave them down and put some clothes on them, they wouldn't look any different to you and I. But now the actual fossil record, as far as we know, is shifted back to 300,000 years ago. And the story gets even stranger when you start to look at some of the new science involving teeth morphology and DNA. There's been a study done a recent study in 2019 looking at the morphology of teeth, of tooth evolution, essentially.
Like
We're
what?
looking at
I
now
did
the
not shoot him in the head.
divergence that Neanderthals being our cousins,
too dumb.
essentially, we and the Neanderthals diverged from a common species at some time in the past. And in order for us to get the teeth that we have in that short period of time, our teeth would have had to evolve at just a much higher rate than was expected. But the researchers found that this isn't the case, and that in fact dental evolution rate happens very slowly. So statistical analysis on this research, on this data, essentially suggests that the divergence from a common ancestor that creates essentially Homo sapiens and Homo neanderthalis, our cousins, happened at least 800,000 years ago. So we're now pushing back the timeline for the human species itself to somewhere around 800,000 years. And in fact, this is also supported by DNA research. So looking at the DNA itself, looking at when did we diverge from a common ancestor with the Neanderthals. There was a paper published in 2003 that put that date at somewhere in the range of 631 to 790,000 years ago. So if you want to round up, you can say I think the window for human beings on this planet might be up to 1 million years of time, certainly 800,000 years of time on the planet. It's a long cry from the 200,000 years that we originally thought. Prior to that, we thought we were about 50,000 years old as a species. And now we're going back into periods of time that go far, beyond the glacial maximum of what we think of as the last ice age. It goes back into periods of warmth. There is tens of thousands of years of upheaval and cataclysm in amongst all of that. And something I always like to say is that if you give human beings enough food to eat in warm weather, we start solving problems. And I think this opens up the window for all sorts of potential previous chapters of potentially civilization, way back within these periods, not just 15,000 years ago, but potentially hundreds of thousands of years ago. The evidence for this type of sophistication in the human genome has also been shown by genetic studies that were revealed recently, looking at the affinities between different haplogroups, so different ethnic groups of people from around the world. And what this map is showing you here with the red dots is that it's been discovered that there is a deep affinity that exists between the people of Australasia and the peoples of South America. Now you'll notice that these red dots don't extend from South America up into Central and North America. And this is a real problem for the proposed diaspora of humanity and the way that human beings, starting in Africa and going across Asia and then down into the Americas through the Bering Land Bridge, down through North America, Central
That was a
America,
fast
and
run.
hitting South America. If that was the case,
That was
we
like
would see
140
these
pace.
genetic markers and these affinities
Maybe
in North
141.
America and in Central America. We just don't see that. What we do see is an affinity that stretches across the Pacific
No glass.
Ocean, which is the largest body of water on the planet, and it's suggestive. It's very suggestive of a large migration that must have occurred at some point deep in the past that left these genetic indicators that we're now finding today. It's
Oh, wow,
showing that
insane.
our history as a race is much more complex than we had originally thought.
Congrats.
Then, of course, the key that unlocks it all for me, and for many people, I think, is the discovery of the Younger Dryas cataclysm. This was speculated about in Graham Hancock's work from 1995, Fingerprints of the Gods. This wasn't really discovered scientifically until around 2007, when the first papers were started to be published, when scientists were actually using clover sites that went back to 12,800 years old in the strata, and by analysing these different layers in the strata, they found
Oh, the double duck.
all of this
That was
evidence
massive.
for
You
what
see
we
that?
call impact
The
proxies.
blessed double duck.
Essentially, the signatures that are left from cosmic airbursts and extraterrestrial impacts, and it's all
Come
shown
on,
in
man,
what's
this
called a
fucking
black
game,
mat layer
bros.
that we found now all over the world: North America, Europe, South America, even South Africa. We found evidence for this black mat layer, as well as impact proxies, things like shock synthesized nanodiamonds, extraterrestrial platinum and iridium. It's very indicative of a massive cataclysm, and it correlates to a period in time that's called the Younger Dryas, and this stretches from 12,800, 900 years ago to around 11,600 years ago. There's been many sites, and more than 50 now sites around the world. There's something like 150 plus
Nice
peer-reviewed
car.
scientific papers that are now supporting this evidence. And it's not only supported by these impact proxies, but it's also shown with the research that's gone into ice cores. So these samples of ice cores that we take from places like Antarctica or Greenland or Russia, we're getting very
No.
good at the analysis of
Do you have
looking at
photos?
the different, basically yearly accumulations of ice. So every year when the
Can you
snow
paste a
lands
photo?
and freezes to ice, it captures things, levels of oxygen isotopes, things
YouTube.
like that can help us to determine temperature. And
Is there a
of course, how much
timestamp?
of the world was on fire, things like this. And those ice cores have
Where's
been
the video of his
very
Camaro?
helpful in showing the true
I love how you
climatic
had it,
history
like,
of the planet. And it
Bookmarked.
shows that we're warming up
Ready
from
to
the last
go.
glacial maximum, but at around that 12,900 year time frame, we just get plunged back very rapidly to the depths of glacial cold, and that exists for a period of nearly 1,000 years, up until 11,600 years ago, a little bit longer in fact, and then we're sort of shocked back out of that, and it comes up. And we sort of continue on this path of gradual warming and enter the Holocene, which is the era we're in today, which, if you look at the history of temperatures and
23
climatic
seconds.
conditions on the planet, we've really had a 10 or 12,000 year period of what can only be termed very nice weather, certainly relative to the past. Now, as part of those ice core samples, we also found some other amazing indications of just catastrophic events that happened during the Younger Dryas. One of those was indicative of up to 9% of the biomass of the planet being on fire, which is just an absolutely mind-boggling number when you think about how
Oh my
much
God, get
that,
to it,
that,
man.
that means. There's actually these soot particles
Get
in
to
the
it,
layers,
man.
from those years that show that there were tremendous fires all around the world.
Oh
This
wow,
period of time
insane.
also corresponds with what you would call the last great extinction event.
That's
The
like
megafauna
fucking.
that existed particularly North and South
That's like
America,
Vin Diesel's
and
ride
Europe,
from Fast and
the
Furious, man.
mastodons, the mammoths, saber-toothed tigers, direwolves, just a huge number
Holy
of
crap.
species, these large animals, megafauna, or anything I think that's over around 40 kilograms in body weight. Almost
What's the time?
half of the species that were around.
What's
at
the
that
quarter
period,
mile
they
time?
all went extinct within a very short period of time.
Insane.
This also corresponds with this Younger Dryas boundary right around this date. So something traumatic happened, and all of the science that's now happened in the last 20 years is pointing to a series of cosmic airbursts and impacts, likely as part of a disintegrated comet that forms an asteroid belt around the sun. It's called the Taurid meteor stream. We pass through it twice a year, and it seems likely that that may have been the source for this debris that the planet ran into and caused this tremendous cataclysm. Although it's not tightly coupled with it, it was probably also a precipitating event that caused sea levels to rise some 400 feet since that time, since the last glacial maximum. So the surface of the planet really changed dramatically as a result of this, and I could safely say that should this type of event happen today, it would be a civilization end. And the way of life as we know it would be over. Our cities would be emptied. There would be a massive depopulation of humans. I should also say that there is corresponding DNA evidence in the human genome that corresponds with the Younger Dryas. There was a drop in population as well as genetic diversity that happened across the planet around the period of the Younger Dryas. So, we were megafauna, we went through it, we survived it, much as did any other species of megafauna that's alive today. But almost half of the megafauna at the time didn't. And it was a traumatic event, and we lived through it, which I think makes it really interesting when you go back and look at what our origin tales are across cultures, both modern and ancient.
It's got to be faster than that.
Poke a stick at any of them
That thing was so fast, dude. That was like a fucking insane.
World-ending fires.
I think that was like a fucking like a 10-second car, man. It could be a 9-second car. That thing was insane.
Characters and stories and gods written up all around.
Maybe not.
But essentially, I think
Was it really that slow? That's pretty slow.
These things, they might actually be containing what could be eyewitness accounts.
It's pretty slow, man. It can't be that slow.
Either in the Younger Dryas or potentially periods.
Yeah, like exactly.
We know that.
No, your Taurus was fast. Yeah, 13. Yeah, it was a 13-second car.
Likely died, and I mean, how do you
pretty good,
code
yeah.
data
But
and
like it's got the
events
huge
when you're talking about
block
oral history? I mean, at the
out the
time,
top. Like, come
books
on.
or any form of writing, if it even existed, wouldn't have survived. You pass these things down generation by
It
generation
looked fast.
as stories, as oral tales, and so they build up characters and stories around these things. But at their core, we have this
But
story
like, it's not
of
that fast.
cataclysm that humans went through, and in many of these cases, even in the modern day Christianity, the stories of the book, they talk about a civilization existing beforehand that was destroyed. Humanity was forced to start again, and this is represented across cultures.
It's slower than what I got. I got nothing. That's faster than what I got.
American tribal stories. It's in South American histories. It's in Nordic religions. It's in
Yeah, that's fast. That's pretty good. That's fast. It is. I thought it. I thought it was like insanely fast.
Because these cataclysms and things like the Younger Dryas were a global effect.
It's pretty good.
And for anyone that's interested, we could spend hours talking about individual things. I do have a video. This is the screenshot of
Yeah.
the video. It's on my channel. That kind of dives into some of these origin tales and what potentially and the relationship they might have with the Younger Dryas.
I think it's the threshold. I
And
think
now
the
we come to what is the core topic of this
4.9
presentation, which
second
is the plethora of
threshold
ancient advanced artifacts and
is my
technology that seem to come from some of the earliest
definition.
times of known history. In this presentation,
0
we're
to
going to
60.
focus primarily on Egypt, as I said
If
up
it's-
front, but there
If
are
it's
certainly lots of
above
artifacts,
5.0
stonework,
seconds,
things like
it's
that we can look at from all
considered
around
slow
the
to
world,
me, and
but,
if it's
you know,
below
we don't have
4.9, it's
unlimited time
considered
to go
fast.
through
That's
all
my
of this
cutoff.
stuff. I do have videos that cover some of those other places, South America, Baalbek, places like that. But particularly in Egypt, I think it's the most well preserved of our ancient civilizations, and it has some of the most
Your
remarkable
Taurus was
artifacts, and
7.2. I thought it would be
artifacts come
more
inside this
faster than that.
small and large. You can
For
see
sure.
here the schist disc, the unfinished
I thought it
obelisk,
would be.
precision-made boxes, vases,
you-
columns, and statues. And in a lot of cases, these things are coming from the very earliest times of known ancient civilization, and they represent technology that
It must be.
really is far beyond
Must be
the
faster.
capabilities of the tools that we know we used during those times in dynastic Egypt. And often when we're talking about vast periods of time, the question of, well, how come we're just looking at stonework? Where are the tools? Now, we could spend hours talking about where are the tools, but I think when you're talking about periods of vast antiquity, the
Dude, the
stonework
used
is
car
really what
market
left.
is so
That's what
trash.
weathers time the best.
Yeah,
Certainly
that's
anything
insane.
metal
That's
is
fast.
extremely
Sure.
precious.
5.2,
gold and
okay,
silver on its
fine.
own, they're only decorative. They're essentially useless
That's
for,
fast.
for tool use or weapon use.
But it's different. It's
But
all
any
different,
metal that
right?
is found throughout just thousands of years of known history would have been taken and would have been reused, and it would have been melted down and
Like the
reshaped
big V8
to form some other
is
purpose,
good
regardless
for
of,
the
of
first
what it was.
half,
Not only that, lots of types of metals, iron,
and the
copper,
twin
things like
turbo is
that,
good for
oxidize and
the
rust
second
and
half. You
just,
know what I mean?
over in some
So
cases
if you look at like
as little as a
0
century
to
or two
40
just turn into
times,
powder and aren't there. So primarily we're left with the stonework, but from the stonework
0
and
to
the
30
tools and
times.
the precision of the stonework and analysis into their engineering, we can determine an awful lot about the tools that must have been used or what it must have taken to actually
which is
create these
important,
artifacts.
especially on the street, in traffic.
Not only that, but we also have signs.
It's
on
just
some of the
terrible.
tools, and some of them
Just
would
a
seem to
terrible
be
used car
extremely
market.
sophisticated.
It's just
In
shit.
fact, you can only really call it machining at some level. We have evidence for saw cuts, very advanced stone
Expensive.
cutting, not
Cars
only
are shit.
straight saws but also circular saws. We've got evidence for advanced
10%
tube drilling, and
financing.
other mechanisms for removing pieces of stone. There is, in the top left of this image, you see what looks like it's an unfinished surface on a bullnose that's on a box that's found at Elephantine Island. It's quite clearly been machined.
But even
in
those are
very straight
expensive,
lines
man. Those
before
are like
it was
fucking like
finished and rounded
$16,000,
off to make it perfectly semicircular.
$17,000
It's an unfinished piece of work,
used
which are
at
actually quite
10%
valuable because they do
APR.
leave tool marks that otherwise might have been polished out. And it's evidence for some very advanced tools
It's too
and
much,
techniques
man.
that must have been used in order to make these marks.
It's too
We
expensive.
can also determine the sophistication of some of these manufacturing systems through the geometry.
You see the
of
same
objects
shitty
themselves.
cars
Like
out
center
there
bottom here, you're looking at one of the cornice blocks that
for
you can
sale
find on
forever.
the Giza Plateau. That is just a tremendously complex.
I still
compound
see
curved
cars from the
surface that
summer
is just perfectly
posted
flat, the eyeball,
for sale.
and it would have taken extremely sophisticated manufacturing techniques to
A
make
couple
this.
I even
We're
looked
going to
at
explore some of these topics a little bit as
and
we go
drove.
forward in this presentation.
They're
But
just
it is worth
they're way
remembering at the same
overpriced.
time
No
how
one's gonna
these
buy them.
generally
I
explained
told them. I
by
told the
standard model
fucking
by Egyptologists and
dealer
archaeologists as well.
manager. So like, no
They're
one's gonna
explained
buy
with
this
these sort of
car.
tools, because these are the
It's
tools
like
that
at
we found.
10%,
I talked a little bit about metal
$18,000,
earlier.
no
You could
warranty.
probably take all of the metal tools that have been discovered across all of ancient Egypt and they would fit into a very small room. It's incredibly
much,
rare
man.
and precious to find metal tools like this, but you can see they're
It's
very
like a
primitive.
miracle.
You have copper chisels and adzes. I think even so, like bottom left here, these tools weren't ever meant for stonework. These are more likely plaster tools or perhaps woodworking tools.
I might look at
We
a
also have things like
couple
flint chisels. Flint
manual
chisels were used,
BMWs
as a very
that are
hard
having
substance to
issues.
carve pieces of stone before people got around to figuring out iron and steel in later
There's a
periods. Certainly flint's much
2011
harder than copper or bronze. And
328
then the other tools were
XI
just pounding stones. And that's pretty much it.
for
That's the ancient
$7,000
right here
plus
on
tax
the second
certified
page.
and
And the
safety.
interesting thing is that the capabilities and the capacity to create stuff with these tools
206,000
is
kilometers.
massively exceeded by the evidence that we have in stonework itself. And in fact, what I'm going to show you is that there
Takes
exists
premium gas. So
across a lot of different categories of artifacts, two different classes of objects. Some that represent the capabilities of tools like these, and another class that really doesn't.
I know.
Before we get into there, it's probably worth grounding
'Cause
ourselves
they don't
just a
make
little
them
bit in
anymore.
terms of what we talk about when we get into Egyptian history or the Orthodox history of the
Yeah.
Egyptian civilization, also known as the dynastic Egyptian civilization. It's good to put some of this into context.
And like they're all
so that when we
used
talk about
cars
Old Kingdom,
now,
New
right?
Kingdom, Ptolemaic
So
times,
they're
we
all like
understand what
10%
dates we're talking
APR
about.
with
And
no
the Egyptian
warranty
civilization itself kicked
on a
off
used
earlier than 3000 BC, roughly
$18,000 car.
3150 BC, with Menes, who was
It's
the
just
first
tragedy.
pharaoh of the very first dynasty. He got started. That's something called the
It's
early
too much,
period.
man.
This encompassed the first two dynasties. Then we went into the Old
Doesn't
Kingdom,
make any
which
sense.
is the period associated with just the mega pyramid builders.
That's why I
massive sites
might
like Saqqara,
try like a
Giza, the
beater
Great Pyramid, the
BMW
Little
again.
Pyramid. All of this happened in the Old Kingdom.
I did like my
Some
330
remarkable
Ci.
pieces of work
But
that are
man, it was
attributed
a
to the Old Kingdom.
fucking.
In between these periods, there was something known
It was
as the
like you're
intermediate period,
playing
which
craps every time you drive that
basically
car.
means there was civil strife, for want of a
So
better
expensive.
term. Inside of Egypt, the upper and lower kingdoms were potentially disconnected. There might have been different rulers before the land was again
The
reunited. into
BMW,
the Middle
man.
Kingdom, which was dynasties
My
11 to
girlfriend
14, another intermediate
At the
period.
time, I love my
Then the
girlfriend
New
now, but I had a
Kingdom,
girlfriend at the time she was
this is
Jamaican.
made famous by
And she said, "Oh, BMW, you know what that means, right?" I'm like, "What's that?" "It means black man working." And I'm like, "Yeah, it means black man working. That's what it means." For me, it meant fucking broke man working, man. Fucking broke man working to pay off the repairs of my car. Oh my god. But dude, it was an amazing car.
When Cleopatra the Seventh committed suicide. Yes, it's
21,000. In a pretty nice car, yeah.
Cleopatra the Seventh, quite famously,
I
committed
drove
suicide, and that happened
a
around 30 BCE.
2017 Mustang EcoBoost manual for $22,000.
And so when
Used
you hear people say that, you know, Cleopatra
100,000
is closer
kilometers.
to us today in time
But
than she is to
thing
when
is,
they
like,
say the pyramids were built.
financing a used,
True.
first of all,
There's
financing
much
any
more
used
time
car is a
in the
bad idea.
past to get to,
Financing a used
this-
car
the
without a
proposed
warranty
date
is
of
even
building of
worse.
the Great Pyramids at Giza,
And financing a
than there
used
is
car
to-
at
to our
10%
modern time. So this
at
civilization
$20,000
vast,
is
and it
just
stretched more than 3,000 years. And
is
it's an interesting
insane.
comparison to make when you compare it to our civilization. If we're generous and say, let's say our civilization, if you stay
At 100,000
started year zero,
kilometers?
that's roughly 2,000 years. I think it's more likely, 1,500 or 1,000 years to kind of get to what we will call our civilization. And there's a clear technological
It's too
process
expensive,
and,
man.
and evolution along that time, right? We were
I might get
much
like a
more
beater
primitive 1,000
beamer for
years
like a
ago
couple
than we are
grand.
today.
Honestly, I might
Technology
do it.
progresses in a,
There's an
an
there's an
upward direction the longer a
E46
civilization
2002
goes. That's certainly
that needs a new
the
starter,
result and the observation you can make by
and
looking at modern history and at our civilization.
it's for
What's interesting about
$1,500.
Egypt, and when we get into these examples, is that really doesn't seem to be
I
the
might
case.
literally
The pyramids alone. These
go
were
check
some
it
of
out
the
and
Great
see what it
Pyramid,
needs.
the middle pyramid, the
Pick
Big
up like
Pyramid,
an
the Great
old
Pyramid. These were amongst
2002 Beamer,
supposedly the very first
4-door,
pyramids ever built, and it happened right at the beginning
6-cylinder
of the Old Kingdom.
manual
And we'll see many
for
examples of some
$1,500.
extremely
Black.
sophisticated artifacts that were
Might
supposedly
do it.
from the very earliest periods of time that never saw their match throughout the entire rest of the Egyptian civilization. It's a
Or a
massive
messenger.
contradiction in terms of technological evolution and a technological timeline. So just keep that in mind as we progress through and take a look at some of these different aspects.
That might be my miracle I'm
of
looking for.
artifacts.
Because I can
So it's
replace the
important to kind
starter.
of ground ourselves and talk a
I
little
can
bit
do
about
that.
how we actually relate artifacts and the things we're looking at into that standard model of history. That we
Just gotta get a
went through.
safety.
This really started to pick up steam, and our picture of ancient Egypt was built out with the discovery and essentially the decipherment of something called the Rosetta
To
Stone. Many of you
2002.
have probably heard of the Rosetta Stone. It was found a long time ago. It's a Ptolemaic era plinth or
Oh,
stellate.
it also has
It actually has
380,000
in 3 different
kilometers.
languages. It's ancient Egyptian in hieroglyphs, it's in Demotic, and it's also in ancient Greek. And this was really key to unlocking the study of ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs. The stone's been on
And
display in the
I-
British Museum, I think, since around 1802. And it was Jean-Francis
Yeah, I don't-
Champollion who really did the first transliteration of these Egyptian scripts and announced that, I think, in 1822. And from there, the study of Egyptian hieroglyphs was born, and we could start to understand the things that were written on walls, they were written on artifacts. Along with
Gates,
that, we
man.
also have
Nice emote,
several
dude.
different records of what you would call a king's list, which is a list of the rulers and essentially the length
Toad
of their
has
reign.
great
We can
emotes.
correlate those back to actual dates. And so we have this chronology of dynasties, of different rulers of ancient Egypt. And remember that the ancient Egyptian civilization was long, and it actually ran into times where you can actually start to cross-reference history
What
from
the
other
fuck?
civilizations. So the Greeks and the Romans, for example, could also record the names and the titles of pharaohs and rulers of ancient Egypt that you could then cross-reference with these kings lists, and so you start to get a good picture of time and how far back it goes. And this essentially gives us this timeline.
Oh
of
no,
ancient
Bill
Egypt.
Gates was
And
right. Oh
with that
no.
timeline and with the study of
Oh
ancient
no,
Egyptian
such a bad
hieroglyphs,
omen.
it's really the writing that becomes
I
the
don't mean
bedrock
anything
of
negative by
Egyptology.
that.
It's not the only way, but this is by far the primary
He
way
was right, man.
of dating
He was.
objects, sites, and everything else into that story of that timeline of ancient Egypt. It's the writing. If something has writing on it and it's got the name of somebody on it, then we can say, this person had it
Yeah,
made,
maybe.
maybe he made the object, maybe he made the entire site. That is the primary method for how stuff is dated into that
Good luck
standard level
finding
of history. Now, this is an interesting concept because there are some issues with it, and to explore some of those, we need to get into, I think, one of the best examples for it, which is at a site called the Serapeum, which is just an incredible site. I've made many videos on the Serapeum, and I intend to make a couple more. But it's a underground labyrinth, a series of these vast passages and alcoves and chambers that contain, 24 or 25 of these just tremendous precision carved granite boxes, very hard stone boxes, granite diorite cyanide. And some of these weigh, with their lids, up to around 100 tons. They're carved from a single piece of stone. The vast majority of these boxes are completely blank. There's nothing written on them. But there are 3 boxes.
Wow, it was fast though.
Look
Look how fast that went.
Hieroglyphs.
That was a really
inscribed
fast
into
run.
them. 2 of them, it's only one little passage or just one line. But there is one box that is pretty much covered in glyphs, and it's covered in inscriptions. And this is that box here. And you can see the nature of the glyphs that have been carved into this box. It's considered essentially to be the most valuable one because it has writing on it. It's the only one you're supposed to be able to go down and get in, get close to and look at. And I love this image of it because on the right-hand side, where we're looking at the corner, you can see how perfect the stonework is. It's actually reflecting the light that's coming from the corridor off the surface of the granite. This obviously isn't a natural property of granite. It takes a tremendous amount of work to get granite to do things like this. These boxes have incredibly straight lines. The interiors of many of them are just absolutely perfect, 90 degrees and flat as a mirror on some of them. And it's very sophisticated stonework, yet compare it to the quality of the writing that we see on the box itself. Here's a close-up of some of it. You can quite clearly see this writing has been done by somebody hammering on this damn thing with a chisel. The lines aren't straight. In fact, some of the inscriptions are just skipped over the surface of the granite where it's too smooth. And it's very obvious that this is the result of a hand tool. Somebody going to town on this thing with a flint or potentially an iron chisel and trying to mark it up. There's a massive technological delta between the manufacturing of the artifact itself, the box, and the technology involved in the writing. I do hear some people often say, well, it was probably different people that did the writing versus those who made the box. That's not really true. Stone carvers are stone carvers. It doesn't matter how good of a painter you are, or somebody who can do calligraphy. Try and do that into stone. Those skills don't really translate. Now, if you were actually doing,
I think I'll play for another 10 minutes or so and then read somebody.
You would have the calligrapher, the scribe, come and draw, paint the glyphs and the lines on the box, and then you would have a stone carver come and actually carve those into the stone itself.
Maybe less.
It's the same set of skills that it takes to work the stone and to create the object itself. And I don't know about you, but if I was the guy who made this box and went to all the trouble and time and effort of getting all the lines straight, perfectly straight lids and edges, and then polish this stone up to where it actually is reflecting light, and somebody came along and wailed on it with a hammer and chisel like this, I'd probably be pretty upset. It does not seem to me to be contemporary with the nature of the box itself. Yet, it's the writing that's on this box that is used to date and relate not only the box, but the entire Serapeum into that story of the standard timeline of ancient Egyptian history. Also, we see here, we can find on this box an empty shenring. This is on the front of the box. The shenring, or the cartouche, which is used to, just exclusively used for royalty and kings. There's no name in it. Now, if there was the name of a king in here, say it was Ptolemy I or something, if that name of Ptolemy I was in here, we could say that, Ptolemy I, clearly he's the guy who ordered this box to be made. He ordered the Serapeum to be dug out of the ground. It was all done in his honor. And, there goes the whole story of history. But this cartouche is empty. So what's going on here? Well, I think what's happened here is that we have to start to think about the concepts of inheritance and reuse.
No.
This site could be vastly ancient. The objects in it could be vastly ancient. And obviously, if it's discovered or found by dynastic Egyptians, it's quite likely that this site was taken over by priests.
I would have passed away anyways. I didn't have enough health anyways.
Awe-inspired, man, look at this object.
Oh, I didn't have enough health.
They could take over this site and essentially sell dedications on these boxes. They probably did the writing. They were probably waiting for the highest bidder to come along and want to have his name inscribed in here. We know this actually happened because in the entrance to the Serapeum, all over the walls you can find these little indentations on the
I'm
walls
like
where there were very
done
small
for
limestone or
tonight.
granite
I'm so
steles
upset.
placed in
Not
there
because of that
you
run,
could
but
pay
just
the priesthood to have your name or
it's okay.
whatever this dedication is put into the Serapeum. All of those steles are gone now. They were quarried in later times, but we know they were there, and I think this is exactly the same thing that's occurring here. The point to really take home from this, though, is that there's just a massive technological gap between the writing and the object itself. And it's not just on the boxes of the Serapeum. We can also see it on many other artifacts, particularly those found in the Egyptian Museum. This is a Hyksos Sphinx. Take a look at the very fine details that are shown here by the photography. The ribs are essentially using light to show their detail. It's an incredible carving. It's a statue. It's made from, I think, looks like
Yeah, I'm gonna
granite
rate
diorite.
somebody in like
Very
a
hard
minute or
formed
two, I
stone.
think.
But when you take a close look at the glyphs themselves, they
Thanks for being
are
here,
also
Toad, and
very
everybody, and
crudely chiseled.
Hideyoshi, and King Nick,
Like
and
the lines aren't straight. You can see the
everybody,
marks that come from the
Moonraker,
hand hammering of chisels.
Ninja.
It's dug in a little deeply, but they're done quite crudely. More details on statues. This is an Old Kingdom statue, again, something that comes from the very earliest times of the ancient Egyptian civilization, and it's incredibly fine. It's made from diorite, even harder than granite. And you can see the upper thorax, the top of the rib cage here is shown up in the very fine details. It's polished. It's just a beautiful piece of work. They were clearly able to polish uneven surfaces. Look at the thumbnails, the fingers and cuticles. Even though there's dust on this statue, all of these different aspects of the statue are polished. This shows you that the creators of the statue were able to polish, non-flat surfaces. You have to remember that the standard model explanation for how stone was polished
Goldeneye, who's
was
playing
that they used
Goldeneye?
rocks and sand and water. They would mix it together and rub rocks on it to
Oh my
polish it,
god.
which you can actually that sort of technique might work on a flat surface, but it becomes very difficult to achieve once you're talking about curved surfaces or very fine detailed surfaces like cuticles or fingernails. But we
19
obviously can
viewers.
see that this polish was able to be achieved by the creators of the statue. Another example, one of the best knees you'll ever see in sculpture, again, an Old Kingdom statue made from granite diorite or diorite itself. The bone structure, the musculature, all of this just pops out of this statue. It's incredible work. And again, we see that the stone is polished to a very high degree. Yet the glyphs don't show those same characteristics of technology that we see on the
Yeah,
objects
I think I'm
themselves.
done for
This
tonight.
statue, again, it's that one of those Old Kingdom statues we were looking at. It's an impressive statue. The glyphs are actually pretty well done, but if you look closely, you see the chiseling marks. You see that the lines of the cartouche aren't straight. You can see that the interior
We've had a
of
lot
the
of really
glyphs
good
aren't
runs.
polished. The interior of the bird, for example, you can see that's not polished.
That
And this
last
is
one
something,
was
once you see
fastest.
this on ancient Egyptian artifacts, you see it everywhere.
The
notice
last
the
one was
glyphs,
one of the
you look
fastest.
closely, you'll see chisel marks.
I knew he didn't
clearly
have
the
much
result of
health,
hand tools,
but
and you'll see that the inside surfaces of the glyphs are not polished. Compare that to the lotus flower motif that's below it. You can see just below this line of glyphs there's a lotus flower motif that's on the side of the artifact. That is polished. So they clearly had the ability to polish out these
Right.
types of surfaces. They
I'm
could
done for
polish
tonight.
these glyphs out, but
Thanks for being here, bros.
it didn't happen. So what does this mean? The glyphs are massively inferior from a technological perspective to the statues, and they're not polished. Is it possible that these glyphs were added much later and in a much more primitive fashion? Here's another example. A beautiful Old Kingdom statue. You can see it on the left here, and then here's a close-up of the glyph that's just been roughly hacked into its chest on the right. I think it's quite possible that we're talking about two separate timelines. Remember that it's the writing that we find on these artifacts that dates and relates them into the story of history, and these are still Old Kingdom artifacts, that the writing on them came from the Old Kingdom, but the artifacts themselves have a massively different sophistication level in terms of technology and what it takes to create them. Not only that, but these statues, again, these Old Kingdom statues, this is a diorite statue from the Old Kingdom, also show signs of pretty sophisticated manufacturing in terms of overcuts. You can find overcuts on these statues along the seat, under the arms, and you have to remember that, again, the standard model explanation for how stone was cut it's grinding. So you're using sand, or you're using an abrasive material, and you're rubbing on it with a copper bar, or you're rubbing on it with a piece of horn or wood or something like that. And the rate of removing granite or removing diorite from that is tiny. You would have to work for hours and hours and hours to